Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first podcast. We hope to make this a regular thing. Here is my comrade to the right of your screen. I'm going to call him comrade. And we are going to make our first episode about this video by Trent and Matt Fradd about how a Christian cannot be a socialist. And maybe the next part will be on systemic injustice in America. But I found this video was riddled with inaccuracies. I think the whole thing was debunked. And as I was about to tell Comrade over here that I originally thought that they had a lot of good arguments, and I was a little bit sweating a little bit when I first watched the video. But I just watched it about 20 minutes ago at 200% speed, just going over through their arguments. The way they dodge and weave through these arguments to deceive people is very clear, and I can confidently say pretty much everything they said was wrong, and it can be easily refuted by me and my comrade over here. So what were your first thoughts about this video, comrade?
I went into the video with the typical presupposition of I'm going to find the same arguments. Socialism doesn't work. Venezuela, the typical. And I did find the same arguments, of course. The typical regular Ben Shapiro type fan conservative arguments against socialism. There's never a sophisticated argument against the basic ethics of socialist economic philosophy or anything. They can never refute anything Karl Marx has ever said about socialism, democracy, gun rights. They just assume basic straw men that are used again on Reddit forums and YouTube comment sections.
Yeah, I would agree with that. They're very purposely hiding from you what socialism actually is, and then they're putting up this scarecrow that you should be very scared. And I think like the biggest sign of that, the biggest proof of that would be the fact that they engage in a very lengthy critique of socialism and history of socialism, but they never, and also they act like, we're going to steal everything from everyone, but they never discuss actually capitalism and any problems with it. And what's also very interesting that I feel like they never discuss, they never quote any Bible verses, and they never quote any, so it's very interesting how they dance around something, but they want to talk about what's really Christian. And they have some papal encyclicals, but I'll say this, for example, since I lean Catholic, is that the encyclical that they're talking about, where the Pope says that a Catholic cannot be a socialist, the next Pope reversed that, because that Pope had made everybody sign something. If you became a priest or a bishop, you had to sign something that you explicitly avow like socialism. But the next Pope said, well, the church can't actually tell you what to believe in terms of politics. That's not really the church's job. So what he's quoting is completely invalid from a Catholic point of view. And it's just really weird because that same thing is used to criticize the church in other ways, and they disregard what that Pope says because that Pope was like really reactionary and conservative. And so Catholics agree that guy, what he wrote in that encyclical is not binding upon all Catholics for all time. So the whole thing is full of lies. What were your favorite lies in there, comrade?
Like the one that really pissed me off is like how like they said that like socialism is inherently evil because it steals away from rich people. That's a complete straw man. That's not actually what even socialism is. I can make the argument that capitalism is stealing from the workers, where the one dude gets more money than the workers collectively as a group. You have one person that can own more than you have like one person that can own more than like, let's say 99% of the population. Like you can't say that dude's not stealing in some aspect. Like
exactly.
Like fundamentally, like he's like that's why people want high taxes on rich people. When you make a certain amount of money, you're hindering society at a certain point. When you make a certain amount of money, a guy making $400 billion a year is like hindering people in society in some aspect. That's why you need regulations on taxes to make sure that doesn't happen. You can't say that's evil because the harms caused by not taxing them is more damaging than that would be done taxing them. Like just taxing them is not going to cause any damage. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, and this is more at the end, but when he gives the analogy of the police officer and a little bit of force by a police officer is good when you want to put the criminal in a car, but obviously you don't want to kill someone. It's like, what's very interesting is he leaves out. So the first thing he does is he defines capitalism in a funny way, right? And capitalism is just the protection of private property. And he doesn't. So when you look at that principle, anybody would agree with that I should have something that I worked for and I kept from, and I worked very hard on, or I should be able to make a living off of what I do very well, like a skill. But he doesn't go into why that would be an excess. Like, so if I if I run Walmart and I buy everything and I shut down all the mom and pop stores and I make all those, then I make mom and pop go work for me for like $6 an hour. So it like, when does that stop? Is it just like private property continues and continues and continues? And this is really the story of the 20th century. So around, possibly starting with the Industrial Revolution, but before that, things were pretty well distributed in the sense that like people probably had enough food to go around for the most part. And then what you have is the accumulation of capital. And Trent here talks about, oh, well, capital just means money and you need money to live. And it's a whole false argument. But what happens in the 50s is you have these multinational corporations and they keep getting more and more and more and more powerful, and they start gobbling up all the land. And then they become more powerful than governments, because they can buy governments, they can collapse countries, they can influence governments, and they can overrule democratic procedures because they buy the lawmakers. So this is a new phenomenon. And it's funny because he's talking about, oh, well, in Jesus's time, you didn't have wealth creation. Now we have wealth creation. So they're defending the immoral system that helps them be very successful. But and because of that, they're ignoring the fact that you can have a company that's more powerful than all the countries in the world put together. So that's the excess, so you want to talk about, oh, police force is a good thing, but the excess is bad. Sure, private property might be a good thing, but it can be bad when you have somebody who owns so much property that nobody can touch them legally or influence wise.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think it's a false presupposition a lot of capitalists have, where they say like, well, no one can really survive without money. Money is not really anything. It doesn't have like any inherent value. I mean, like, I don't think anybody really thinks this. Like, under capitalism, it's a tool used to control people, and from the bourgeois, to control society, to have classes and to have hierarchies within the system. That's what money is really used for. And then you price certain products on, certain things, and you say, well, this is worth this much compared to this, and well, this person making this much can access this much easier than this person, even if the one person works harder, but one person was just born into inherent privilege and advantages more than the other person, even if they don't inherently deserve a certain item more than another person, they still get that. I mean, that's like inherently unfair, I would say. So like, money doesn't really like make you live. What makes you live is food, shelter, clothing. That's what you need to live for. We don't live for money. That's ridiculous. I mean, that's I don't think anybody really even believes that, because I can live
No,
without
no
money.
one.
I
No
can't
one.
live without food, or
We and our family, right? So like, we work to sustain our families, so we do it for family. We don't do it for money.
Yeah,
But
I mean, like,
I forgot one point, a little bit, if I could interrupt you, is that one other false thing that Trent Horn says, right? So he gives an analogy, and he doesn't want to talk about what the he doesn't want to talk about what the he doesn't want to extend the analogy because it's so destructive to his position. So he talks about, like, let's say you're lost in the woods and you find a log cabin and no one's living there, and like, it's somebody's summer home, and like, you're starving, and so you break into the house and you have to survive, so you open the fridge and you eat whatever's in the fridge just to survive. And so he goes, well, that's allowed because that's an emergency. So how about this, right? Because the way he set up the analogy is, A, it's someone's second home, B, no one's home. So what if you're starving, right? And someone's home? Or what if it's their first home and they're just not home? So under what circumstance would you be allowed to break into that home? Because this is why the second home thing is so deceitful of him, is that this is why he's really attacking socialism here in a very tricky way, is that that's the problem. Second homes. And this is what he doesn't want to admit. So everybody should have a home, but like, why do people need second, third, fourth? Like Mitt Romney had 10 homes. So it's like, why do you need 10 homes when some people don't have a home at all? And I know they're going to come up with all this redistribution and stuff and all that. But what I'm saying is, though, notice his analogy had to be a second home. It couldn't be, because it's too much cognitive dissonance for a capitalist and a Christian and a theist and a moral person to say, well, what if you're starving and the only food is in a cabin where someone is home? Now, what if that someone, because now you have this moral dilemma that someone has to say yes or no to you when it comes to food. And hopefully the person will say yes. But under capitalism, you are not obligated to anybody else. This is why it's unchristian and immoral. Because you're not obligated to anybody else, somebody could die on your doorstep, and that's not your problem. And this is why Trent Horn had to put that, oh, what if it's your second home, it's moral to steal from somebody's second home. But they don't want to talk about how much luxury that people have. Because now, what if you're homeless and somebody has 10 homes, like, and you're squatting in that 10th home? That's illegal under capitalism. That's immoral under capitalism. And yet, his analogy, the one that he's tricking you with, doesn't go that far, because he's very scared of the implications, and that's why he sets it up that very tricky way.
Like, I'm gonna give him the analogy, and like, did he say the analogy is a good one? And did he agree that like it's moral? And he said emergency, right? Like it was emergency,
right?
And he said it was justified.
Yeah.
Couldn't you make the same argument that we need to then if that's justified, couldn't you say that the homeless crisis in general is an emergency, so therefore we need to abolish the entire system and transition into a full communist society?
Exactly.
Right. That analogy can be like this is what I mean. Like, you can use an analogy and just make it bigger, and then it can be it can still work just as well. I can use Trent Horn's analogy and just expand it to the entire system, and then I can completely abolish capitalism under that same analogy.
Right. And but see, that's why he very narrowly defined the analogy, because like he was very scared of its implications and also the moral implications. Because, you know, anybody would say, well, if no one's in the home and it's their like second home, you know, you might be able to break in. But the fact is that, like you said, there's a hunger crisis, there's a homeless crisis, there's a housing crisis, there is a education crisis and a financial crisis. And so it kind of brings me to what he kind of said about communist China. Let's just go there, because, you know, they like to argue a lot against, you know, the history of communism and communist regimes. So China is a capitalist country. And let me explain that to you, Trent Horn. The reason is because Mao had a great leap forward, and that was pretty much a failure. And he was what he did was, and let me explain why it's a failure, because we are discussing communist history here, and communist China was brought up. So what the central government of Maoist China did was they established the quotas. And what you have to do is, he wanted to compete with the Soviet Union. And by competing with the Soviet Union, he wanted to produce more steel than the Soviet Union. Okay. And this is the problem with authoritarian dictatorships. And so from a centralized economy, he ordered that all Chinese melt their pots and pans to make iron and pig iron. And the way you did that was by chopping down the trees and making a kiln, like something so hot, an oven that's so hot in the ground. And then you melt all your pots and pans, and they produce the most pathetic iron that you can imagine. The same thing happened with the agricultural thing. He forced people to go into the farms and start planting, and then he needed quotas, and then he would ship a lot of that grain to the Soviet Union because he was having treaties with them and military agreements with them. So when the people underproduced, they lied and said we overproduced, and then they were taxed based on that overproduced number, and they barely had enough food for themselves. So I was telling Comrade earlier that we should always keep in mind that the mistakes of prior governments, including capitalist governments and also leftist governments, and we should always try to improve upon this. And so you shouldn't put undue burdens upon the people that you need to make this much grain and this much pig iron, especially if it's not producing good grain or good pig iron. And so because that Maoist Great Leap Forward was such a failure, and most leftists would not even engage in something like that today, they had to rapidly commercialize China under Deng Xiaoping. Now, the first city to do this was, of course, Hong Kong. That was the autonomous zone in Shanghai. And then later on, they added more. And then when Hong Kong joined China, that accelerated the influx of capital into China. And so what you have now is 29 Walmarts in Beijing alone. So that is not a communist country. It became capitalist under Deng Xiaoping after the death of Mao, and it continues to become capitalist. So what is China today? It is a capitalist government, but it's also state capitalism, because the government tells the biggest businesses what to buy, what to sell, but they're harnessing all the power. So it's the worst, because it's authoritarian capitalism. It's the nightmare regime that capitalism could fall under, because you have a big government that tells you you're going to work for 50 cents an hour in a Foxconn factory to make iPhones for rich people in the West. And you're going to have no say about it, because we're an authoritarian government and we're using capitalism to control you.
Oh yeah, that was nicely said, actually. I do agree that that Deng Zhao, I can't really pronounce his name properly. Yeah, he was a capitalist. Yeah, I actually was gonna say to you earlier that I saw a video of this old Chinese man. He was discussing how after Mao's death, he turned China into a fascist country, and with the police state especially. And he said the police were basically fascists out there, arresting people who were supporting real Marxist theory, or the Communist Manifesto, etc. Yeah, there was a video I saw of that. So yeah, I mean, like, that does actually have a lot of credence to it, I feel like.
Yeah, and if you really want to compare, though, communist societies and capitalist societies, I think in many ways the communist societies were superior. So, for example, my friend went to China and he saw. I mean, I'm not going to deny Chinese police have been pretty brutal to certain people in certain movements, but my friend went to China and he saw that there was a drunk guy lying on the street in the morning one day, and a police officer put a traffic cone in front of him, so like nobody would like run him over, or like, you know, with a bicycle or a car accidentally walk into him or something. So I pointed out that like they have a better civil society than we do, and he agreed. You know, in capitalism, you have homeless laws and vagrancy laws, and that guy would probably spend a night in jail just for sleeping on the street.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, like, even now, like, you have benches that have a certain designs that prevent people from even laying down on them. You can say that's a anti-homos design in and of itself.
Yeah, and actually, I want to, you know, before somebody says, "Oh, you're just using an anecdote of what your friend saw in China to be representative of like communist society," this is the analogy that I gave to you before. But I have friends whose parents are from Romania, and they came here. Now, first of all, this woman from the 70s, she was a computer programmer. So I don't know how many women were computer programmers in America in the 70s, but it's famous that there weren't that many. So the Soviet Union produced doctors, engineers, computer programmers, very high level scientific professional society. And
at one point, Cuba
the whole
was
Eastern
the most
Bloc.
wanted for a doctor. At one point, Cuba actually had the best healthcare system, and they were like the most wanted country. They produced like the best medical doctors and medical professionals, that they were like the most sought after in like the world.
Yep. And they exported them all over the world too, because like people were in need in like Africa and such.
Yeah, I mean, that, like, again, like, Guevara did a lot of good things. I think him having a medical background helped greatly impact Cuba's healthcare system for the better.
So what I was saying about Romania, though, was that my friends, they went back to Romania in the 90s or the 2000s, and they said they saw old people begging on the streets. And they said, we never had that when we were in Romania. So, people want to talk about, capitalism is the greatest wealth creation in the history of the world. And if you want to empower the poor people, give them capitalism. That also means old people begging on the streets. And, like I said, I'm not saying it's perfect. You did have Chernobyl. You had a lot of Soviet officials who didn't care about the people, and there was a lot of cronyism and such going on. But at the same time, though, like on the radio was classical music. They were very literate. They were very educated, and actually, speaking of the Soviet Union, the funniest thing, like, I mean, this is the most easily refuted thing that Trent Horn said in that entire video. They were laughing at the car that like East Germany made or something, and like, oh, that car, you had to like shake it because it wasn't well made. It's like, what about the Ford Pinto? This was a car that Ford knew that it would explode once you hit it from a certain angle at the back, and like people would die. And then their company's internal memo said, yeah, we know this flaw exists, but it's better to just like pay people for the insurance because only like 30, 40, 50 people are going to die like per year or something, than it is to like recall all the cars and refit all the cars. And when they were sued in court, that came out in the public discovery documents. And so, like, yeah, you want to laugh at the cars the West Germans were making. Look at the cars the Americans were making. Like, you can't just point out a single thing.
The East Germans were making?
Yeah, I'm sorry, East Germany. But that's the example Trent was giving. Like, oh, this car, you had to shake it because it didn't.
Yeah, they even made fun of Yugo cars, the Yugoslavian cars.
Yeah, so it's like there were poor cars made under capitalism. I don't really understand. And like I said, under capitalism, you have an incentive to
under capitalism. You have
like
more failure than success. Except the success.
Right.
Just
you have an incentive to cut
failure.
corners. Right. You have an incentive to cut corners for profit, even at the expense of human life.
Yeah. Yeah, like they just like you have so much failures under capitalism, like more failures than success. Except that people want to make you think that they have so much success more than failures. No, it has more failures than success, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
Every homeless person on the street is a failure of capitalism. Let me say that right now.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of under capitalist theory, billionaires have to think poor people are degenerate loser idiots. That is what no, seriously. I mean, like, if you like are a true capitalist or like you follow capitalism, under that theory, poor people are considered degenerate idiots who don't know how to get rich or succeed in that system.
Right.
Therefore,
lazy.
they're not good enough. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
They
like,
deserve to be poor.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like they're like, oh well, I mean, like, hey, survival of this, whatever. I mean,
right.
Like,
yeah, and that's Christian too, by the way, right?
I mean, like, it's a part of.
I can't believe two Christians are like pawning this off.
I can make the argument
ideology.
Survival of the fittest means that no matter what, without capitalism, we'll still survive because naturally through evolution, we'll always just seek to survive. And we always will. Before money was even invented, how did we even get here? Oh yeah, because money doesn't do anything. We do stuff. Money doesn't do anything. The work doesn't do anything.
Right, we produce. So, but let me go into something that they were also dancing around. So when he was asked to name two capitalist countries, he gave Hong Kong and Singapore. So the amazing thing, right? Hong Kong is the government regulates so much of the land that the rents are so high that like people can't afford to live in Hong Kong anymore, and it's really overcrowded because like they don't want to build in certain areas and things like that. So and also there's no minimum wage in Hong Kong, so that's pretty scary because like when your rent is like $2,500 a month and like you have to work $6 an hour or less, then it's really not feasible. So I'm pretty sure nobody would want to live under that system. Singapore is also an authoritarian government. Like if you chew gum and spit it on the sidewalk, you used to be like arrested or fined. So it's like, and also really small city state. And also, by the way, both of those are former British colonies. So it's like that was a hub for trafficking heroin to China. So like, yeah, you can build up a city fine with drug money, but like you can't say, oh, well, this is the paradise I want to live into. Let me give another example that Trent Horn should be scared of. Israel, all the land is mostly owned by pretty much the government, and they control everything in there. And Israel was founded by kibbutzes, which, was an agricultural experiment. So, it's like Israel was founded as a socialist state, but conservative Christians love Israel, and so you don't want to say anything bad about Israel. I have news for you, capitalists. Israel is a socialist country. Israel has free, very minimal. My best friend used to pay like $3 a month for healthcare. So like Israel has almost free healthcare for everybody involved. So go ahead and look at your favorite country in the Middle East, because that's proving you wrong from the day it was born.
But like they do like engage with like a lot of bad things with like Palestine, though. I mean, like
I know, but I'm talking about the economic system. What Trent Horn said.
yeah. Yeah.
So I'm saying, okay. So the funny thing is, Trent Horn said, "I'm for a welfare state," and then he quickly changed the topic. And so that's really interesting, because he talked, "Oh well, America, we have a welfare state," and Matt Fradd said, "Oh, in Australia, we do too." And then he also talks about how Sweden has a welfare state, but it has the highest number of billionaires to the population, than higher than America. So in Sweden, the maximum tax rate is 90%. So when he's talking about, oh, the police force is good, it's just not abuse of force that's good. So what do you, I mean, if you're defending Sweden and you think that's okay, then you're okay with a 90% tax rate. And then here's the other thing. If you can say I'm for a welfare state, the question is, do you believe that everybody who falls through the cracks of capitalism should be taken care of? And so the funny thing is, they define capitalism by the Christian writer David Bentley Hart, who says like, capitalism is simply the responsible management of the public purse. And they're like, oh yeah, I agree with that. Sorry, socialism is the responsible management of the public purse. And they're both like, yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. But here's the thing. Capitalism will inevitably result in people who fall through the cracks, right? That's disabled people, handicapped people, people who are have to be caregivers for handicapped people and things like that. And also people who don't have a social support system, that like, okay, I lost my job, I can't pay my mortgage, and now I'm homeless, and nobody in the city lives with me. So, I don't have any family in the city, so now I'm going to be homeless for like 2 years or however long, or permanently. So it's like, do you believe those people should be taken care of? So that really is how I would define socialism. Socialism is the society. It's not a system of government, okay? It's a society in which everybody is taken care of, and everybody has enough to live off of.
Yeah, good points. With regarding David Bentley Hart, he is a socialist. I remember like he said that he'd rather cut off his hand than vote for a libertarian. That was very funny.
Okay.
With regarding what Matt Fradd said about Australia, though, isn't Australia a capitalist society run by a conservative government?
I mean, I think like they have a minimum wage that's like ridiculously high.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I don't know. They may be like a liberal government of some sort. I'm not sure how their politics work.
So, did you want to say anything else?
Yeah, with regarding to the Nordic countries, actually, a lot of conservatives will say, like, a lot of leftists will argue for Nordic countries, like, in their success with regards to I'm not like not leftists, but I mean like a lot of like social democrats or like Bernie supporters will argue for the Nordic countries as success. Then a lot of conservatives will say, well, they're not really like that, like,
right,
they're pretty far right if you really think about it. But then they'll say, okay,
they
so
manufacture weapons, they export fighter planes.
Yeah, so then a lot of like, okay, but why don't we adopt a lot of their
they have
policies?
Oil resources.
Yeah, exactly. Like, why don't we adopt their safety net policies though? Like somebody will say, then like, okay, well, no, that's too far left for me. You know what I mean? Like they're not willing to like agree on like safety nets. Like I have no idea why they hate safety nets. Like it's ridiculous. It's like it's the least you can do. You know what I mean? Like it's the least you can do. It's frustrating though. I mean, like I'm not even like I don't even like care about safety nets. Like I just want a full blown communist society where there would be no need for even those things, right? You know what I mean? But like
no, I hear you.
Yeah, but like
I agree with
right
you.
now, like that's the least we can get safety nets.
Right,
like, that's the best we can get.
Yeah, and the funny thing is though, I wrote down 3 Bible verses because again, nobody's talking about the Bible, right? We all want to talk about, is a Christian allowed to be a socialist? But first, we all know the phrase, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to go to heaven. So what is Christ saying? He's saying that, and you know, I love how he just turns everything upside down. Trent Horn be like, oh well, back then you had to give to the poor. Now we have to give them capitalism. It's like, yeah, okay, so Jesus, Saint Augustine, Saint Francis of Assisi, all your saints who were poor that they didn't even have shoes to wear, all those people, they didn't know how it goes. You know how it goes, but they don't know how it goes. Okay. And then the other one that I love is well, of course, blessed are the poor, for they shall inherit the kingdom of heaven. So it's just says that you know, Christ looks out for the poor and that they're very close to God. So, you know, it's not about getting the poor to stop being so lazy, right? Like, that's not what he's saying, but that's what you're saying, Trent Horn. But I love this one, and this one kind of blows me away. But in the Gospel of Matthew, a young man, it says a rich young man came to Christ and says, like, you know, Master, what must I do to go to heaven? Or get the kingdom of heaven? He says, honor thy parents. He says, yeah, I already do that. And then he says, what else should I do? He's like, keep all the commandments. He says, yeah, I already know that. What I should do? What else should I do? And I want to follow you. So tell me. He's like, well, sell all your belongings and come with me. And the New Testament says that that man looks down very sad and he just walks away. So very clearly, the New Testament is saying that there are going to be people who love their money so much that they're going to walk away from Christ and they're not going to follow him,
and
even though they have the
going
chance.
to claim to be Christians, and they say, "Yeah, I follow these things and these things, but I'm not willing to budge on the money thing." You know what I mean? That's exactly what that message is saying, and that's exactly what Trent Horn indulges in.
Right, exactly, and he wants you to love your money, and he wants you to love your possessions.
What about acts when it's like to each according to his needs and abilities? That is like a really far leftist thing to say.
It's straight out of the Communist
That's
Manifesto
literally a
almost.
Marxist quote. It's literally a Marx quote. I mean,
so what it says is they sold all their belongings, they gave away all their possessions, and they shared everything they had in common with one another. Like, that's communism. And, you know, I was on a Catholic server and they were all jumping on me. It's like, well, where do they live if they sold all their houses? I'm like, don't be mad at me. Ask Luke. Why are you asking me? That's what it says, you know, because Luke wrote Acts. And they're like, no, but where would they live? And then somebody else showed up and said, like, oh, well, they met on Solomon's porch, which is the steps of the temple in Jerusalem. But it's like, yeah, I don't know where they lived. I don't know how they lived, but they weren't living in the air. So they must have lived somewhere. But
you can say that they indulge in some communal communist society where they were let into people's houses for free to stay for shelter.
Right.
They got fed.
They lived off other people's kindness.
They fed people as well for free.
Right.
Healed people for free, which would be a sign of free healthcare, for example. He didn't charge people to be healed. You know what I mean? Like,
right. Blessed are the healers, right? Because
exactly,
the physicians. Yeah. So it's like, it's really shocking how deceptive that they were throughout the whole thing, because like they want to critique socialist history, but they don't want to talk about capitalist history. And when you look at capitalism led to colonialism, and colonialism led to apartheid regimes where people were like, you had white rule over a majority of the population. And it's like, well, it's might makes right. So you're marrying Christianity with like Nietzscheanism and power. And it's like, it's very sinister for you to justify. And even like, I mean, Chomsky talks about it all the time. How many times is American power used for imperialism? And it's like, even in the past, 20, 30 years alone, it's just been a nonstop series of imperialist wars, from Vietnam, Korea, onwards. So like, you can't just say, oh, we're going to look at socialist history and like, oh, well, they're involved in theft. Yeah. Okay. If like theft is our sin, your sin is exploitation. Like, you exploit people till like they're bleeding, till their feet are blistered, till they can't stand anymore. Like, this is what people like. Do you understand? Like, a Foxconn factory has like people working 24 hours nonstop to make iPhones. And like, they're talking about the miracle of South Korea. It's the same thing. You have people working round the clock nonstop in miserable conditions, and
they have high suicide rates, like enormously high suicide rates.
And my friend from Korea, he talks about how like the corporations own everything in Korea. Like, they're more powerful than the government. So like, I mean, when you have like the Samsung Corporation is like
So it's a corporatist country then, like.
Yeah, it's bigger. Yeah, it's bigger than Google and Facebook and whatever Twitter combined, respective to per capita. Like Samsung owns hospitals, it owns healthcare, it owns like and so it's like it's a complete. If you think that like it's great, like by the way, and not for nothing, right? South Korea was a military dictatorship until the 80s. So it's like like if you're talking about oh well you can have an authoritarian leader to bring about a wonderful capitalist system, then why not have an authoritarian leader to bring out a wonderful communist system? It's very like their knowledge of history is so shallow, or they want it to be shallow, so the people just get like one or two arguments and it's like, oh well, we're like socialism is theft, you can't steal from another person, but you just admitted if somebody lives in a log cabin and it's their second home and nobody's home, you're allowed to steal. So obviously there's a point where to live you can steal. And so the same way, it's like there's a point when the exploitation, when the obsession for private property, that I'm not going to pay my workers minimum wage, that I'm not going to give them healthcare, that I'm not going to give them a decent living, like or I'm not going to that
Vacations,
is exploitation.
time off, etc.
Yeah, pregnancy leave for women and men, so it's like disability leave.
Like
So
they don't even allow workers to form unions. I mean, like it's that bad.
Right. So
another thing I would like to say, the Garden of Eden, for example, like that society that like however you want to read it, but like let's just take the Garden of Eden, like like as it is. Like this, like you can't read that and say that it's a free market capitalist Republican society. The Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden is genuinely, I would use it as an example of a communist society, for example. No, you know what I mean? Like the Garden of Eden, like you would agree with that, right? It would be considered somewhat of a socialist.
Oh yeah. Before the fall, there was no capitalism.
Yeah, I mean, like they worked collectively. They got free food, free shelter. Yep. Everyone didn't work for money. That like it was a communist society, and
they were
isn't
innocent.
One of the main doctrines of Christianity to get back to Eden? And then isn't that what Christ came there for? And then he taught a whole bunch of like communist stuff. Like that's literally what the Bible is about. It's like literally like some like old communist book that's like teaching us to get back to Eden is to get back to like some sort is to get like eventually get back to a full communist society. I feel like that's what the Bible's about.
It's pretty crazy that they never mentioned the Bible once in that whole conversation.
They never do. I've never really ever like I've never watched.
They don't want to talk about that. Huh?
Never. I remember the only argument I've ever heard was some sort of weird argument where it's like, oh well, like if you look at the Old Testament, you had someone who was like a king, and that was the best argument I heard. Like legitimately.
I mean, whatever. It's like, remember the story of Joseph? It's like when they were gonna have a famine. It's like he put all together society's resources, put them in a greenhouse, so we could have food later during the years of hardship. So it's like the same kind of thing. Is that it's that you want to make sure society can handle the years of famine, and that involves some redistribution of wealth, probably a lot. And so this is the funny thing though, right? So like the way they're okay. By the way, the second most easily refuted argument Mr. Trent Horn made was the idea that like, oh well, if you're for private property, what if I use my car as an Uber? Or what if I use my capital to start a business? And I can't do that under socialism. Like they pick the most, like, by the way, is like, are they Christian apologists or are they like capitalist libertarians over here? Because like they're taking everything out of the libertarian page, and the conversation almost had nothing to do with Christianity, other than papal encyclicals that have been reversed by future popes. And so and Pope Francis is pretty lefty, so whatever.
I'm not even joking. With regards to engaging with a lot of lefty Christians, I've only ever seen them use arguments from the Bible, and they also sneak in ethics and philosophy. When I hear a conservative arguing about Republican or right-wing free market capitalism, whatever, corporatism, whatever they want to like support, I've never seen them like support it biblically or even mention Jesus. When Matt Fradd did his video, the only person he mentioned was Thomas Aquinas.
Right.
Like what? I mean, like he didn't mention Jesus. No, he didn't. Because if you
Right,
think
and the
about
Pope, and the Pope of Pope Pius XI or something.
or even the current pope, with regards to that, the same pope
No, but
who met with
he
yeah.
didn't mention anyone but Saint Thomas Aquinas and
Yeah,
Pope
isn't Matt
Pius
Fradd
XI.
supposed to be like the biggest like know it all about Catholicism, Catholic apologetics, whatever? Like, isn't he
Yeah.
supposed to know this stuff? Either he knows this stuff and is deliberately lying and misleading people, or
Yeah,
he just
it was
doesn't.
designed to mislead people into a capitalist worldview, and so that's what they did. They took every page out of the libertarian capitalist worldview, and it's like they didn't even question it. Like they're just like, yeah, facts. And so here's the thing, right? So this is the problem with the argument of like, oh well, I have a car, I might use it to make money, so that's my property that I use to like become a boss or like a owner of a business. And it's like you see, okay. Okay, and like I said, I'm talking about social democracy and things like that. But he says I'm for that. Like, I mean, I'm for a social state, but you don't say how much of a social state. So, for example, we have food stamps in the United States, a food program. But does that we still have child hunger? So we either have to put more money into it or make more people eligible because it's not covering everybody who might have a hungry kid. So that's the thing. Like, it's easy to say I'm for a welfare state and then quickly change the topic because you don't want to talk about how much would it take to really have a welfare state that would really take care of people to eliminate child poverty, to eliminate hunger, to eliminate homelessness, because that's the conversation they don't want to have. They'll just see a welfare state is inherently a capitalist thing. And you were trying to tell me this earlier. It's like, well, I'd rather have like abolition of the system rather than do a welfare state. I hear you. But the funny thing is, though, they'll say we want a welfare state, and then they won't even fund the welfare state that would be necessary to keep capitalism alive or moral, even. But let me just backpedal and finish my other point, though, is that okay? So you're saying I can't have I need private property so I can do Uber with my car, right? Basically, that was his argument, and under our system, that would you wouldn't need to drive an Uber, first of all, to make money.
No, I mean, my refutation against that would be like, yeah, like I'm gonna say, yeah, well, let's ban Uber and all those things. Like, who cares?
Yeah, like you don't need to like ferry somebody else around to like make money. Like, I mean, here's the thing though. So let me just do this because I want to be concrete to anybody who's listening. Okay, this is how it would work. We all would carpool. You wouldn't have to pay somebody $50 to take you 20 minutes, 40 minutes away. Okay, that's how it would work. It's like, hey, you have a car? Where are you going? Can you take me? Or we'd all be taking like all transportation will be public transportation.
Yeah, and there wouldn't be even need for that because isn't Uber just a system used for like as a pay for a side-on job, or anyways? Like, and like, if you're
Yeah, and by the
really
way,
if that,
Uber makes the company rich, and it works out that after taxes and maintenance for your car, the Uber driver makes about $6 an hour, which is under minimum wage.
I
So
can say that there's certain things we have to sacrifice in order to transition to communism, but I can also say that using Uber as an example and saying, "Oh, I can't drive Uber, therefore communism bad. Let's just keep people
right,
poor." That's a bad argument. In fact, that's just a really bad argument. That's just really
yeah.
bad. That
And by
is
the way,
not a reputation.
it's really bad because like only desperate people have to drive Uber. So it's like it's not about freedom.
When
Uber
people
people,
make
Uber drivers
arguments
are
like
trapped into
that, like,
poverty.
ugh,
Like the UK Supreme Court just ruled that like Uber drivers have to be given vacation pay and minimum wage, and Uber's just ruled that out. So it's like because you can't just like make somebody work and then not call them an employee.
yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, like Uber's. I
Yeah.
mean, again, this is what capitalism does.
Yeah,
Even like
but Uber exploits the driver and the car, and it gets rich, and it also destroys the cab companies, because cab company drivers are pretty decently paid. So it's like yeah, it's like basically you take the whole taxi industry and you give that money to big tech. That's capitalism, like, and that's exploitation. So Uber is a great example, actually, Trent Horn. Of why we wouldn't allow Uber. And the same thing, like, oh, if I have a house and I want to rent it out, like, look, we would have public housing, social housing, we'd have, people who are able to work with each other. And so, like, I just want to also put this out there, right? Like, we understand that capitalism is the most efficient system to produce the infrastructure needed to build up the industry of a country, right? But we're already there. We have the factories, that like, and the amazing thing with digital currency, if everybody has a wallet on their cell phone, you could easily redistribute wealth that way. Like just give direct deposits to people on a cell phone, because billions of people have cell phones. So technologically, capitalism has brought us to a point where we can abolish capitalism. I'm not going to deny that capitalism was needed to bring us up to this level of material prosperity. But here's the other problem with capitalism. It's wasteful beyond measure. We're talking about plastic bottles in the ocean that are going to kill the things, food that like people could, while people are hungry. And then the worst thing, like, I mean, look at the overproduction in China and the inflation. So I saw like there's hundreds of thousands of bikes that are abandoned in a forest in China because like Western or whatever companies had ordered these bikes, and then like they didn't need it anymore because of the 2008 crash or the whatever crash that we had, with the coronavirus or whatever. So there's a crash every like 5 years under capitalism. It's hard to like keep track of all the economic crashes that happen very regularly. So because of all that crash, there was an overproduction, and you just dumped the goods. And it's like, wait, people need bicycles, but you can't give out bicycles for free. Why? Because that'll result in no money for the bicycle companies being made. So what do? You just abandon it in a forest. So now you have ecological destruction, waste, damage to a forest, and bicycles that are just rotting there with nobody doing anything. And so it's like, why did you make all that? So like, is that a good way to handle the resources that God gave us on this earth? It's a disgusting way of being responsible stewards of the earth that God made us. It's very much against
how
Genesis.
many empty houses and empty buildings there are in capitalist societies that are not even being used, redistributed to homeless people at all.
Half built, abandoned, yeah, nobody finished that. So yeah, they waste every single thing. Like, these are precious gifts from God. This earth is a precious gift from God, and you have chosen to exploit the resources, exploit the people, and then waste it just so you could keep making profits.
Did you also know that statistically under leftist governments, you're more likely to be healthier to have kids? Your hormone levels are also higher than under capitalism. Aren't capitalists like
stress levels?
Far right Christians who are like pro, traditional like family members, like procreate, all that stuff. Under socialism or communism, you're more likely to be healthier to procreate than capitalism. Like that, I can make an argument from communism as well. I can literally do that. It's actually better to have sex under communism than it is under capitalism. Statistically, that is just true. Like literally, like that would just, because you're more moving around, you're more likely to be healthier, you're more likely to be in a position to be able to afford to have a kid than you would be under capitalism. Less stress levels. You're more likely to not need to have an abortion. Under capitalism, you're actually more likely to need to have an abortion. Under Republican policies, you have more abortions than under Democratic policies. Even the Democrats are not even leftist. The fact that you can be even slightly more, a little bit left than the average Republican Party or conservative is just drastically amazing to me. Like the differences, like the more left you move is just amazing. Imagine if you moved super far left. The differences would be drastically better.
The funny thing is, though, I used to listen to Rush Limbaugh when I was a teen, and then they would come out with this argument: is that like Americans, their homes are like 500 to 1,000 square feet bigger than those in Europe, because Europe's social democracy. Americans eat more meat. Americans eat more red meat. Americans have better access to healthcare as a whole. And so it's like, yeah, okay. Actually, let me write this part down. But so the thing is, though, the flaw with that is, right? Like, okay, your house might be a little smaller, on average. You don't eat as much steak on average, and maybe you don't have access to like the latest MRI machine that's coming out of the Germany or advanced imaging techniques or whatever, right? But that doesn't matter. Right? Like, what if you're constantly, like you said, hormone levels? So if you're constantly in fear of getting fired from your job, if you're being exploited at your job every day, you're underpaid, and you don't have a fair minimum wage that's actually letting you put food on the table for your family. If you don't have time to spend with your kids because you're hustling 2 jobs and you're a single parent and all that, and you're not getting any subsidies, so or you have to go back from maternity leave after like 3 months or whatever, that is worth living in a house that's like 1 room smaller. It's a facetious, nonsensical argument. And on that note, I want to add this because Trent Horn, uses this very disingenuous, and I'm trying not to get mad, but despicable argument. He says that, like, well, if you're living under communism, you have bureaucrats, and bureaucrats are the bane of existence because the bureaucrat is going to tell you how you're going to live your life, and that's just not fair. And that's why we should have capitalism. And it's like, yeah, in capitalism, your life is run by a corporate bureaucrat. The health insurance company is going to deny your child coverage to have a cochlear implant in their ear. The health insurance company, even though you've been paying the whole time, is going to say, yeah, we don't cover that, or you went out of network, so therefore you're going to have to pay, $50,000 or whatever. And so your life is run by corporate rules instead of government rules, which you can vote on. So none of that made sense.
My response to that would be under capitalism, the system itself is a bureaucrat. You're forced to do stuff. The system forces you to do stuff. Otherwise, you die, and they don't give a shit about you. Like that's what happens. They leave you behind. You get left behind. They don't give a crap about you. That's what it is. The system itself is a bureaucrat. If Trent Horn is afraid,
you're right. Nameless, faceless bureaucrat. Word.
Yeah. I mean, like, is Trent Horn like thinking some dude is gonna come there with a Ushanka hat and an AK-47 and point a gun at him and say, "Do this work or you die"? Like, that's not what's gonna happen under communism. No, obviously, people collectively organize. We discuss these things. There are things that need to be discussed. Who makes video games? Who's gonna do the entertainment? These are things that can happen under communism, and we can. These are things that are possible, that are achievable, that can be achieved, have been achieved, and it can be achieved again. If not,
and
in a will.
Yeah, word. And it reminds me of one other huge thing that they did to like smear AOC is that, like, well, they're like, oh, why should the government, like, you and me, right? So like they're talking, they both probably make like $500K a year, right? So they're like, oh yeah, you and me should pay for somebody who doesn't want to work, right? And they both have a little chuckle, right? It's like, yeah, first of all, nobody doesn't want to work. We all have a creative capacity, and we all want to give our gifts to the world, and we all have individual gifts that if they're developed fully, we can become very successful and prosperous. So capitalism discourages that. So in Denmark, what they do is when you're unemployed, they'll give you a subsidy and they'll pay for your training so that you could get another job and that you can be successful. And they have one of the highest per capita income rates in the world. They have one of the lowest unemployment rates in the world. And they also have one of the highest taxation rates in the world because it's a social democracy. And so that's the thing. Like, they don't want to tell their audience all the good things that socialist programs do, because if you tell somebody that, hey, you're unemployed, because look at the unemployment rate since 2008, and like I said, capitalism has crashes every 5 years, 7 years. Like, it's just part of the cyclical nature of their stock market economy. And so if you have unemployment and all the people who are ever unemployed could have just received government training and gotten a better job, that everybody would be for that. But they don't want to talk about smart stuff that the government can do. They just want to talk about, oh, the bureaucrats telling you what to do. And also like death panels. That's what they said about Obamacare, that they're going to like say, well, we don't care about you, so you're just going to die. And that's how the healthcare system is.
Yeah, exactly. With regard to this, like, oh, well, you're just paying for people who don't want to work. Well, I mean, that's not true. People want to work and they want to like have a life. They're just in a system that just makes it nearly impossible for them to do that. So therefore, we need to have policies in place that help these people, because it's the ethically good thing to do.
Sorry, could I elaborate? I know I spoke at length, but I would like to really elaborate, because again, people don't understand what we're talking about when, like, they think we're like unrealistic when we say that, like, people will naturally gravitate to whatever they're good at. There are people who love to cook. There are people, those are the people who should be cooking. Those, like Five Guys Burger or whatever. Those are the people who should be staffing it, because I've met people, they just love to feed people, So it's like that is, and there's people who, love to travel. So we can have them truck supplies across the country.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's like, if we just like, what is your talent and your natural aptitude? We could, and the fact is, like, the lack of job satisfaction, depression, and job turnover, people leaving, because they hate it, it costs hundreds of billions of dollars for capitalism. People are not happy. and they all hate their jobs under capitalism. So it's like that's what we're offering. We're offering a system where you could be truly content. And believe me, there's like, I mean, they can't even imagine it. But yeah, there's people who want to be doctors and heal people. There's people who want to be computer programmers and computer fixers because they just
Theologians,
enjoy.
philosophers,
Yeah,
scientists.
but I mean, I'm saying there are some people who really enjoy getting viruses off of somebody else's computer, and like they just have a knack for it and they're really into it. I really think like every profession and every human, and also here's another funny thing: it's like we have skyrocketing unemployment, in capitalism, but like there's old people that need to be taken care of. There's children that need to be tutored. There's so it's like, oh, what about the human need that's not met under capitalism? Because you have this unemployed labor pool, which drives down the cost of wages for the people who are working. So they want unemployment, right? Because you want to be able to fire workers and hire someone new. And so they want people to be so hooked. And so that's really the point, is that they don't want people to have satisfactory jobs. It's very important to the system that like you're just a cog in a machine, and therefore you're easily replaced. Because if you have a skilled worker, God forbid, that person cannot be replaced. That person can't be dismissed or marginalized or discriminated against. And sorry, the last point I want to say is when they first moved away from an agricultural economy to a capitalist economy, they called it wage slavery. The idea that instead of like me having a house and like you're gonna give me an hourly wage so that I can go and pay rent in a big city. Like that's slavery, because like basically you're just being given like this little stack of bills and like go live off of that. Like no one cares if you live in a nice apartment, if you have enough clean water for your kids. Like it's just, here's your stack of money. Now, go do whatever you do, but make sure you're here at 9 o'clock tomorrow. So capitalism is wage slavery. And I hope everybody understands that it is a system of slavery, and you all are enslaved by some corporation. And even if you're not working for a corporation, at some point, you're dependent upon the corporation. And even public sector follows like a corporate structure. Like it's not about human need. So but and again, I want to emphasize that other point. You have millions of unemployed people, and yet you have human needs such as elderly people need to be taken care of. So it's like your system fails to put people to work, not ours.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, a lot of people like have concerns. They'll say like, okay, well, what about sports or entertainment? How is that going to work under capitalism? My answer to be is that if you can contribute something to society, whether that be with entertainment, emotionally, you can get awarded with that. Yes, being a sports athlete, you can get awarded to entertaining society, making them less bored, more less stressed, wanting to do something, engage with the community better. Those are things that can benefit society for the better, and therefore, yes, they can be rewarded for that. Under capitalism, they're just rewarded drastically more than the average person. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you're not genetically born a certain way, you get paid more with certain aspects with regards to certain sports than you would be, like, say, if you're born 5'8". You know what I mean? Like there's certain advantages people are born with, and capitalism doesn't care about that. It cares about the best of the best. Under communism, it sees that people are just, regardless, a lot of them are just disadvantaged, and they want to help them because that's the morally good thing to do. And you can have a system where everyone's equal and they all get recognition in a good way. You know what I mean? Like, so it's not bad at all. Like, it can work. I think sports under communism would be way better than it would under capitalism. Actually, I feel like more people would be actually successful at a lot of things under communism than they would be capitalism.
Capitalist sports is the worst thing ever. I'll give you two examples. It's really sad, actually. So, for example, horse racing is done for betting, and that's why it's like such a huge industry. And I almost met someone. I was just talking to them online, but like they were a horse jockey and they fell off and they were paralyzed for the rest of their life in a wheelchair. And it's like everybody wants to play the game and bet on it, but nobody cares about I mean, obviously the money pays for his healthcare and everything, but it's like being a quadriplegic is in other words, like you know, people should just ride horses if they want to ride horses. But you just took a population that's like what 5'4", right? And you became a jockey because you're not too tall, and then you're ordered to race horses like like for money, and you had an accident, and it's like, well, I think if you weren't like spooking these horses out and raising them like to be $1 million horses, you wouldn't have to like put people through this meat grinder. And the other example, right, more concretely, because that's just an anecdote that I wanted to share of like how evil capitalism can be, because like it creates like all the jockeys you see and everybody like cheers and everything, right? But how many like just within the past couple of years since you've been betting on these horses and going to these stupid shows, like how many people became paralyzed from the neck down because of you, and you're funding this evil enterprise, right? I mean, that's why religion's against gambling in a way, right? Because it's like all this money, like it pools the money for the wrong reasons into evil stuff. And so like I'm not saying nobody could fall off a horse under a non-capitalist system. I'm just saying though, you created an industry where like 5'4" people are disproportionately at risk for falling off horses. And then the party goes on though, because of bread and circuses for the masses. But the other point, kind of more seriously, but I just wanted to like put that emotionally out there, like how much suffering really happens under this evil system every day in every way. Is that you have black athletes, especially like they are like under college basketball, they're not even allowed to take a lunch, and the coaches make millions and the schools make millions. And like if a college athlete even takes it, then they get in huge trouble. And so the other thing is though, if that athlete gets injured, they lose their scholarship, and then they lose their career. So it's like, and the funny thing is though, a majority of those are black athletes who need the scholarships, and that's why they like become really good athletes so that they could go to good schools. And the thing is that white athletes don't need the scholarships that bad. And so, basically they are cultivating young black men to, focus on athletics so that schools could make money, millions and millions, and become famous, and coaches could make money, millions and millions. And what do the athletes get? $0. They can't even get a lunch from like somebody like an NBA official or something. And so and then the argument is, oh, well, when they go to the NBA, they make a lot of money. But again, that's not how most people will not go to a major league sports league. So this is just straight up. I mean, but what do you call it when you pay somebody no money? It's called slavery. So exactly. What is it? And so like, and so the funny thing is like, I learned that because I was talking to my cousin who watches a lot of sports, but I saw this Harper's Magazine statistic that like 75% of black Americans believe that college athletes should be paid, and like only like 35% of white Americans believe that college athletes should be paid. And this is the problem with privilege. The problem with privilege is that you don't know the suffering of other people, and you cannot imagine the suffering of other people. And that's why you vote against a policy that would help other people, because you're like, oh, well, I had to pay for my son's little league. Everybody else can do the same, And so it's something that you don't understand what it means to make $0 when you're from a poor family. And also you're making everybody else rich, not just rich, filthy rich. And not just filthy rich. We're the only country in the world that has athletic programs at the higher education level. No other country has all this exploitation going on. So, and if you say, oh, well, we should ban sports from colleges, you would just be like shunned by capitalists, because like, what do you mean? I love the basketball, college basketball. That's even better than NBA.
Exactly.
But it's like, yeah, or at least pay your people, man. Like, there's so much money in the system, and you don't even want to pay them. You're sick. You're depraved. And like I said, they're taking all the risk, because if they break a leg, bye. Who cares?
Yeah, exactly.
And
I was
again,
gonna say with regards to the gambling thing,
and I just want to emphasize. Sorry, just one sentence is that people don't realize the suffering that like other people are going through, and that's why you're so cold and callous, because like you're not the one who has to suffer. Similar statistic is that 75% of people who are on minimum wage are women, and like men make all the laws. So if you could just understand Like, I mean, this is the problem. The problem is that you cannot put yourself inside another person's shoes. That's capitalism.
Yeah, a lot of conservatives have a trouble of like trying to put themselves in other person's shoes. With regards to gambling, it's a bourgeois tool, I think.
Yeah.
What it is like capitalism deprives you
Right,
of a
right,
lot of
right.
things, right? And it
You
makes it
wouldn't need to
hard.
gamble in a socialist system, right?
Yeah, so like it makes you have satisfaction, like a little satisfaction, like oh I got this, oh it feels good for a brief second, right? So it gives you this high from certain things that under communism you would already have and wouldn't need, but under capitalism it deprives you of those things so much, it delusions you into thinking that you only need those things and that the system itself is so good and that you don't need to change it. But in reality, the system is so bad, it makes you deprived of so much that you think the littlest instances of success of like, oh, I won this bet, I won $5. Oh,
Yeah.
that's so amazing.
Or
Like it,
you know,
it, it
I got a Lexus or a Mercedes. Yeah. But go ahead.
exactly
Sorry.
it
Yeah, yeah.
deprives you of so much, and when you gain like these little like these little material, like goods here and there, like you know what I mean. Like it's like a little like here's a partition, here's a lollipop you get now and then to satisfy you, but
No,
just
but
still be a slave.
to add to that, what is gambling? Gambling is the idea that if I put in $20, I'll get a million. And so it's like you want to be the uber rich super class that like you idolize. So like, and you're dirt poor. You don't even have like food in your fridge. Like, I mean, my mom told me that she knew people in California who, as soon as it's payday on Friday, they drive to Vegas, and like you have no money, you have no fridge, you have no money in your bank, you have no food in your fridge, but you're going to Vegas.
With hopes of coming back with more, and then
Yeah, that's what it is. It's like you want to escape your poverty. That's why you're going. And like, guess what? You're only going to be poorer because your chances of like winning are like less than lightning, getting hit by lightning.
yeah, like it's so ridiculous. I mean, like a lot of Christians say, like, "Oh, I'm against gambling." Oh, like, hey, I'm against slavery. Hey, I'm against all these things. But like, capitalism has all of those things, and it's like I've literally heard Christians say so calmly, "Oh, you have like the leftists supporting radical views like free healthcare." I'm like, "That's a radical view, free healthcare? That should be a really standard view everyone should
Yeah.
hold." Like it's like these,
You know what's funny about
yeah.
reactionaries? The goalposts always change. Like back in the day, women voting was like radical. Back in the day, like people who didn't own land voting was like radical. And you know, I mean,
Yeah,
here's the funny thing,
exactly.
right? This is the thing that the whole Trent Horn conversation was ignoring. It's like, yeah, I'm for like like minimum wages and regulation. Like he changes his thing. It's like you don't want regulation in a country because then businesses won't move there. And then he changes it to over regulation a second later, Trent Horn. And so this is the thing is that in 1880 there was something called a Haymarket massacre. Some people call it a Haymarket riot, but basically, they were anarchists who were demanding workers' rights, and the police fired into the crowd. This was in Chicago, Haymarket Square. It's like a famous park plaza in Chicago. And so the police fired into the crowd and like killed these anarchists. And this is what they taught us in the textbook. It was just something that happened. Like, they killed anarchists arguing for workers' rights. I later found out years later after becoming a leftist, this is what they didn't teach you in high school. What were the radical anarchists demanding? What was their cause that was so crazy that like the police had to shoot into the crowd? They wanted an 8-hour workday. That's what they were advocating for. And they didn't teach me that in high school. They just said, oh, well, these were just anarchists who were like arguing for workers' rights. And it's like, because you had 16-hour workdays and 12-hour workdays. And like just the idea that like, oh man, I get to go home and like sleep and talk to my kids after 8 hours was just so radical that like they would like sick the police on you. So it's like, this is the funny thing. They want to talk about, anarchists and communists and socialists, but they don't want to talk about who led the movement for workers' rights in this country and who led the anti-war movements in this country and who was always against imperialism and exploitation from the beginning.
Or peace.
Yes.
A lot of people make fun of leftists and they think that they're like pot smoking hippies. A pot smoking hippie is more moral than the standard conservative. I can make that argument.
Right.
Easily.
And also, they probably advocated against the war in Vietnam, which killed 60,000 Americans.
They did.
Majority of them being disproportionately
Noam
black.
Chomsky did. Bernie Sanders did. In fact, Bernie Sanders actually marched with MLK.
Right. No, actually, he didn't. That photo was not real. But he
really?
was he was arrested for
he was arrested
University of Chicago
Yeah,
for
University of Chicago.
arguing against segregated dorm housing.
Yeah, he was.
So he was down with the struggle in those days.
In his
And by the way, forget about the famous people, bro. Comrade. I'm talking about just the people who are at Woodstock, whose names and faces we'll never remember, but they
Yeah,
were, like a lot of, not
they
Woodstock,
were.
because that was
Yeah,
an out of control party. But I'm
they
just
were like
saying that
heroes.
generation was, yeah, heroic.
Exactly. I mean, like a lot of conservatives say, well, if you tax the rich, they're gonna move away and they're just gonna protest. No, how about we protest them and say we won't work unless you give us good working conditions. Let us own the means of production. Otherwise, we won't work. The system will fall. Society will crash. That's actually what would happen. The workers are so much more important than the owners. It's actually
Yeah, we
ridiculous.
do everything. We do
Yet
everything.
capitalism will convince you that the owners are the most important. Without the workers, the owners are just simply greedy
Well, let
narcissists. Like,
let's let's. I wanna just present the other side just for a minute. It's just that, like, look, somebody had to put all the supply chain together, But at the end of the day, though, like on a daily basis, yes, the workers are the ones putting it together. Like, for example, let me say, the workers are, let's say, the cooks and the cashier, right? In a Five Guys burger, right? So, but the cook and the cashier wouldn't know how to get potatoes from Idaho, and wouldn't know how to get the steak from whatever. But at some point, right, we don't need the boss anymore, because he, set up the store and the layout, and hire because you have to hire an architect to build the store and everything. But yeah, at some point, um you don't need the boss anymore, he or she. And the reason is because, look, the supply chain is already set up, the other thing. So we do have to work on, and this was the struggle of, like, the Black Panthers and other leftist movements in the 60s and onwards, is that, like, first, the Black Panthers started out as an agricultural cooperative of, like, communal farmers in Georgia or Alabama or something, or Mississippi, where the land is really cheap. And so the idea was, like, if we're farmers and we just exchange our own goods, we don't need capitalism, and we definitely don't need people to, oppress us, or, have our schools or whatever. So it's like economic independence is really crucial. And so, like I said, at some point with Five Guys burgers, you can get the burgers from the grocery store or whatever. So, but yeah, let me just, the reason I'm pushing back at you is just the owner kind of keeps the supply chain together, and at some point we have to be as good at figuring out the supply chain as, the bosses are. Um, but like I said, in a socialist communist society, we could probably do it. It's just like, hey, like, you got cows, like, can you send? Anyway, beef should be more expensive anyway, because you're. By the way, this is another huge critique of capitalism. But let me see if you have anything to say, because I did speak at length.
not really. I think I agree with pretty much everything you said. Yeah, I mean, like, there's many flaws uh, with capitalism that it just can't fix. I feel like
Yeah.
inequality is one of them. Because the system itself
Right.
requires inequality. I mean,
Yes.
like this idea that anybody can make it if you work hard enough. I mean, like, just trust me. I mean, like, hey, I have the story of this one black guy. Hey, like, he grew up in segregation. He was really poor and he became a billionaire. Like, if he can do it, then
Yeah.
you can do it. That's a bullshit
Yep.
lie. First of all, how
Yeah.
could you have everyone being a billionaire if, in order to be a billionaire, you need to have a system where you have workers working for you, or you have some sort of way of making loads of money with regards to possibly cryptocurrency. But even that, like that's like bullshit. I mean, like, I'm sorry for forgive me for my language, but like, even with regards to that, like, that's not really like not everybody can do that. Like, this is not like me being negative. This is just factual. Like, not everyone can be a millionaire, and not everyone
Yeah.
can be a
You
billionaire.
know, a funny analogy, sorry to interrupt, is that during the days of the robber barons, they often pointed, like, oh, Andrew Carnegie, he was a Scottish immigrant. Now he's like the richest man in human history because he's a steel tycoon and he built Carnegie Hall. And it's like, yeah, that's the one story. Like, that anecdote doesn't prove like all the Scottish immigrants and other immigrants who are, like, packed into tenement houses with, like, 12 people in a bedroom, one common bathroom to, like, 5 families. It's like, and like, no heat, no protections against what kind of poisons are in the air. So the other thing is though, like I often explain to this way to people who are really thick, right? Because capitalists are really thick because they really love their own ignorance. I pointed to this. Look, Barack Obama was raised by a single mother, right? And so it's like me saying, well, having a single mother is good because you have somebody who who became the president of the United States because he had a single mother. But I'm pretty sure we all know that like having a single parent makes you more likely to be in child poverty, child hunger, makes you more likely to be into crime because it's really hard to be a single parent and kids get caught up in the wrong influences if they're out on the streets all the time. So it's like therefore ideally nobody should be raised in a single parent household if you can help it, right? But they say that all the time with family values. It's like, oh, this is why we can't have single moms and all that. But it's like, okay, so you understand fully well that you can't use the anecdote of like one person making it with this limitation. It's the most nonsensical argument.
Yeah, I remember like a few conservatives will say like, oh yeah, if capitalism is so bad and so racist, how could Barack Obama be president? And like, how can he be like oppressed if he's black, if he's president?
And my 400, and by the way, he's half white. But go ahead.
Yeah, my responsibility is because like he had other privileges with regards to class and money, and that helped him build advantages that other black people.
Yeah, we never had a black president. We've had a biracial president.
For example,
get that clear.
An NBA player has a kid. His kid is black. His kid is oppressed. Systemically, he's going to be looked at differently by some people. The system may treat him differently. The cops are going to treat him differently. Probably, he's going to get called the N-word.
But did you catch because there are people who will deny that, and the funny thing is like Trent Horn admitted this, and this is why I really want to discuss the second half later of systemic injustice and BLM that they talked about. Is that but he admits though when I'm at an airport, my wife looks blonde-haired, blue-eyed. And, when I'm with her, I'm okay. But when I'm just by myself, because he's, curly haired looking and he's a guy and he kind of looks maybe Arab or Jewish or whatever, like he gets way more harassment at airports and from like public officials, authorities, just because of the way he looks.
And the thing is, Trent Horn's white. Could you imagine if like you have some really like hardcore looking like culturally black person from like America, like they're gonna get heavily discriminated, let alone a Middle Eastern dude who looks fully like Iraq or like from Afghanistan, for example. I mean, they're gonna get heavily discriminated. I mean, like, it's ridiculous.
They are ridiculous. But it's funny that like Trent winded up like kind of giving some ground there. But again, the way he gives ground is the sense like, well, I'm supporting the most capital. Like there was not a single critique of capitalism in there. Actually, so I wrote this down. So I'm just gonna jump into this. But I think like the biggest refutation of capitalism, and I put it on, I discussed this before with another channel, is that industrial agriculture is the single worst thing to the environment and also against the dignity of a living being. So, when Rush Limbaugh put out the statistics, Americans eat more red meat and more meat in general than their European counterparts, is that like, but at what cost? Because you have these giant pig farms and these giant cow farms that like they have manure in like a lake and then that goes into the groundwater. And then that also releases methane into the air, which accelerates global warming because methane is more of a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. And then what happens is with all those fertilizers, and if there's a flood, the manure also goes into the local river or whatever. But with all the fertilizers, that's just nitrogen on top of the manure. So you have nitrogen from fertilizer and manure, which is nitrogen too, running down the Mississippi River. Every river like has this dead zone because there's so much nitrogen fertilizer that at the mouth of the river where it empties out into the ocean, there's no fish that can live there for like 100 miles around. And so because we need fertilizers and we need manure from like giant cow factories. So this is destroying the ecosystems that we live in. It's poisoning our water supplies. And that's why your steak is so cheap, so frankly, I'm going to say this right here, right now, under my system, you would have to pay more for meat because that is a dignified creature of God. It does not deserve to be under a shack that or no outside. Like cows that are milked for milk, their udders are like sore from being milked all day, and they're like pus also, and that goes into your milk. Because like you can't just have a machine attached to your nipples all the time, just pulling out the milk. So it's so disgusting what we do to animals, like chickens like broiler chickens, they grow within 6 months. And if you let them live past 6 months, they're too fat to walk, and they have like deformities and tumors because they're not designed to live that long. They're only designed to be like raised and killed in 6 months. So all this genetic deformities and this nitrogen ecological damage is a sole result of your system, and it's not illegal. It's encouraged, and it's encouraged so that companies can make a profit, and that meat is cheap. And yeah, I guess people want to eat steak and people want to eat chicken and all that, but honestly, if we could solve hunger in a day if we all just only ate chicken, or even better if we could just go to eating plants. But at least the chicken, right? So it's like we should respect animals and let them go outside, and that's capitalism, right? You're exploiting animals, you're exploiting nature, you're exploiting the ecosystem, and you're exploiting people, and that's too much for me.
Yeah, I mean, with regards to the environment, yeah, I mean, under capitalism, the environment does get harmed drastically more. Conservative policies are likely to deny science behind climate change. You have conservative politicians who drastically deny the science behind climate change. Most capitalist societies will drastically impact the environment worse than, say, a socialist society would, because leftists are pro-environmentalism inherently. That's what we have to be, because we are pro-environment. And under that, because since capitalism,
and we wouldn't put millions of farm animals under one shack just for profit.
That's a lot of them are vegans as well. I mean, yeah, and it's like if you're hurting.
I like meat, but I'm just saying, like, care for the animal,
Yeah, exactly.
And the like Jewish law, like kosher law, that's part of it. Like you have to hand slaughter the animal. Like they just kill them on an assembly line, And frankly, like you should like it's inhuman to just put a bolt in an animal's head and then just like continue the chopping block. Like that's like it's inhumane too. Like it's against the dignity of an animal. Like we should really, if you have to kill it for protein and meat, then at least raise it in a caring way and kill it in a sustainable way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like exactly under capitalism, like you're harming the environment, and that's going to eventually cause harm to agriculture, food industry, and eventually you're going to have famines, and eventually it's going to lead to death, starvation, etc. So yeah, under capitalism, that's eventually what it's going to lead to. And that's why we need to abolish the system and be in favor of a system that's going to be more supporting of the environment. Whether some people lose jobs, those jobs can be redistributed to other needs, and that can happen. And yeah, that would be ethically a good thing to do objectively.
It's just so funny because I think we've like demolished capitalism in one conversation.
Yeah.
But I think we should go back to the question that Trent Horn and Matt Fradd were asking: can a Christian be a socialist? And I think it's so clear that it's the most immoral system
I
ever.
think the question I can ask is: can a Christian even be a conservative? I don't think so.
A capitalist, yeah.
Yeah, I think in order to be a Christian, you actually have to be a communist to be a real Christian. I actually think that.
You can't be a capitalist in the sense that you believe in unlimited exploitation of people and natural resources.
An inequality, natural inequality that just has to happen in the system.
Yeah, I mean, Rousseau talks about this. There's natural inequality, right? Like one person might be taller than another person, one person might be faster than another person, one person might be smarter than another person. But those differences are like, like the tallest person in the world is no more than twice as tall as like generally the shortest person in the world, right? Like just say 4 feet and 7 feet, right? That's how short. So that's only like a double inequality. But unnatural inequality is the one that is, well, and let's say you and me had apples, right? Like I might have 5 apples, 10 apples. You might have like 20 apples, 50 apples, right? But here's the thing. Those apples are going to be gone in a week, right? So you're not going to be rich like forever. And again, that's only a difference of like 2 times or so, right? But now with human inequality, like human created inequality, not natural inequality, but artificial inequality, human created inequality. It can be exponential. I can have millions of times more net worth than you. I can have dozens of times more hourly wage than you. I can have uh, 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 quadruple, quintuple times as big of a house as you, right? So it's not. That's how it's very strange, and we should always remember that, like, yeah, there's a little bit of natural inequality, and I'm for, like, I mean, there's nothing we can do about that. But what we're against is the thing where the CEO makes 800 times more than his average worker, and like 30 years ago, 40 years ago, it was like 4 or 5 times more than the average worker. So yeah, I just wanted to jump in there because you said natural inequality, and technically I would call that like the artificial inequality. But I mean, you were correct the way you used it. It just reminded me of how Rousseau put it, that like humans get a little carried away with, they're worse than nature when it comes to inequality.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, inequality. I mean, like people like to straw man what communists mean by inequality. They don't mean like, oh, hey, I mean, like, some people are just naturally born this way. Like, we don't mean that. We mean like the system itself creates inequality because it relies on inequality. And when a system relies on inequality, and if we have a way to fix that, we ought to fix it. Some people can't fix being a certain height. Some people can't fix looking a certain way. Some people can't fix being born with certain disabilities. Those are things that some people just can't fix. But when you have a system that which can be fixed, and which can be fixed greatly, easily, I feel like you ought to do that. And I think it's an objectively morally good thing to do, is to demolish a system that has inequality, that is inherently built on inequality and racism.
Right. Right. And but built on excessive inequality and excessive racism.
Yeah, I mean, like, as Comrade Fred Hampton says, is that like fascism, I mean, and racism is a byproduct of capitalism.
Yep. Well, I think that was very exhaustive. I think we battered everything, like, and I took good notes. And thanks for waiting for me while I watched the video a second time, because that really helped me like realize how easy this was gonna be, because this was too easy. I mean, like, if anybody is a capitalist and they would think that they can refute us, the two of us, me and my comrade here, feel free to leave a comment. We'll have you on sometime, and we'll try to put it on to a live discussion.
Or you can
But
just hop on Discord or something, and we can have a private chat if you want. If you don't feel comfortable about even being.
well, I mean, come on the show, because, like, you know, again, we're rebutting Trent Horn. So if Trent Horn's watching this and Matt Fradd are watching this, feel free to come on, you know, our channel, or like because you put out a lot of misconceptions, and I think like people believe these misconceptions. But yeah, I mean, yeah, we should invite people to the Discord just to have a private discussion. What I'm saying is, though, these ideas really have to be put out there. I don't want to just debate capitalists, because I know they have their own silly arguments.
I think
they need to be brought into public, and they need to have to answer for all the crimes that they're defending.
Yeah,
So honestly, I'm not going to debate you on Discord. I need you live, capitalist.
Yeah, I think we should also touch on other subjects with regarding people being transphobic or homophobic, for example.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole. Hopefully, we'll produce all this great material on why capitalists are wrong. But I would like to thank everybody for tuning in. And I'm not going to say please like or subscribe, because we're not doing it for the fame. We really just want to engage people with the ideas.
We don't care about that
stuff. Yeah, so, and we don't even care about like my name being put on this or anything like that. No. It's all for the better of.
It's all about ideas good. And further influencing people to further the revolution and to
We need a better society, and we need to bring that about like urgently, because capitalism is neglecting people, it's killing people, and it's causing like so much destruction on a daily basis. It won't survive because it's such a destructive system. So really, even capitalists, you should think about yourselves as people, and it's in your interest to have a better future for your children and grandchildren, in a way that we don't destroy this earth, and that we don't just let things keep going on the way they are. Because if things keep going on the way they are, either nature will vomit us out, or the third world, right? If the West continues to live in whoa, I got 1 day shipping by drone, you know, and like other people are like still living in slums and nobody cares about them, they're going to have some kind of takeover of their government, and we're going to be like invaded by countries with slums in them or something. So it's like, unless you want global inequality to continue and the international order to collapse, you really need to do something about the gross inequality that capitalism creates.
Yeah. Also, the Bible also talks about taking care of the earth. That means being pro and supporting climate change. Um, that means not being climate change deniers, being science deniers. That means supporting the scientific consensus behind climate change because it is being caused by humans. We do need to stop it.
Yeah,
It's
very
only
clearly.
going to be stopped under leftist policies or
You're right.
uh,
You're right.
society.
You're
It's
right.
not going to be stopped by a capitalist society. Only a communist society would be stopped by. So yeah, that's my views on that.
Yeah, we have to take profit out of pretty much everything. I think people realize it's important to do it for healthcare, but it's extremely important that profit is not the sole driver of human ambition.
Like it just boggles my mind. Like the basic tenets of Christian belief is just basic leftist belief. I feel like. I mean, I don't know. I mean, like I was a leftist before, like naturally, like before I even knew what politics was. Like I just assumed Jesus was like regarded as like some socialist, like hippie. I mean, yeah, like like a lot of people just think of like Christians as like socialist hippies. I mean, like isn't that like what they were like regarded as like at one point? I feel like. I mean, I don't know. And now,
Yeah, and we got our first viewer too, by the way. So that's so great. Sorry, what were you saying, comrade?
oh yeah, and I feel like it's just as like slowly the conditions around us have changed and therefore have influenced thinking of certain people. And you thinking that like the average Christian is like a Republican Trump supporting free market capitalist. I mean, like it's ridiculous. I mean, like that's inherently anti-Christian. It's anti-objective morality and being a capitalist. It's a garbage system, and we should abolish it completely. I think it's that bad. It's gotten to that point. Yeah, and I'm very serious about it.
Yep. And I think I brought this up with you before, but the song the Internationale, it was based on a Christian hymn, and it talks about the sun, and it's really about the Son of God. But like and also Christian socialism predates the Russian Revolution. So it's like and also Christian anarchy. So these ideas are very much rooted for within Christianity and religion in general. Actually, let me make this point actually. So Nietzscheism, right, talks about a morality inversion, and what Nietzsche says is that
Also, Jesus wasn't a reactionary; he was about progress.
yep, I agree. And he was a revolutionary actually.
Yeah, he was. He was very progressive. He wanted to abolish like a lot of rules people believed. He wanted to abolish the entire system actually, and that's why he was regarded as dangerous, revolutionary, and was killed for it. Like every other comrade, like Fred Hampton, for example, was killed for that.
Yep.
Like literally, Fred Hampton, I feel like was like I mean, like he's like almost he lived like similarly. Like I'm not saying he was Jesus, but like he lived a similar life. Where like he was betrayed, killed. He was revolutionary. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I said this before. I was like, all Saint Francis of Assisi didn't have money to wear shoes, and like most of the saints lived that way. So it's like if you're religious, you're supposed to love poverty. We hate wealth. We hate the world, and we love our fellow man, and we do everything we can to support him or her or them.
Exactly. Like
But
we want equality for everyone.
right, and love, like Christ things like you have to love the Lord thy God, and then love thy neighbor as thyself, and all of the commandments hinge upon these two things. But
that means supporting a system like communism, which advocates for equality, happiness, and a better society.
and social justice, right?
Yeah.
But Nietzsche's morality inversion, what it says is that like religion, Nietzsche hated religion, and again, they said his sister edited his documents, so this is not even what Nietzsche really believed. He's
I
very
think Jesus hated
misunderstood.
like a lot of aspects of religion itself. Like I don't think he was for
Right,
religion being used for power or being used
right,
for
right,
money or anything like that. I think
right.
it's supposed to be used for something different and deeper than a lot of Christians even realize. I feel like.
Yeah. So Nietzsche says that and this is he's seething about this. Religion does is it takes there's naturally people at the top, the Ubermensch, and there's naturally people at the bottom, the Untermensch. And so what they do is they what religion does is gives power to the weak, and it puts the strong, who should be on top, on the bottom. And so he hates this idea, but like that's what it is. It's about giving power to the helpless. It's about supporting the weak and like the disadvantaged. And so the funny thing is, capitalism is the opposite, right? So capitalism is social Darwinism, and whoever is powerful should be powerful and should get more powerful, and whoever is weak, well, it's because they're lazy and stupid, and they deserve to be exploited, and that's
Yeah,
how the system works. And so that's the thing, though. So it's like capitalism really endorses the opposite of religion, and which is a Nietzschean morality, which is all about the strong dominating the weak. And so this is why Nietzsche hated religion. It's because religion gives power to the weak. And it's so funny because like you have people making this ridiculous podcast saying that, well, socialism, you can't be a Christian and a socialist. But it's like, well, capitalism inherently involves about crushing those beneath you. And so you can't be a Christian and a capitalist.
exactly. You have to be a communist to be a Christian, and like also, yeah, like I agree with everything you said. I think you made a lot of good points. And like, for example, like the Bible even talks about like the first shall be last and the last shall be first, meaning that like the last, as in the proletariats, the low people of society, and the bourgeois will be the last. And in terms of like they'll be eventually crushed into joining the proletariats and to uniting into a society for equality and better, instead of having inequality. You know what I mean? I feel like that's the deeper meaning behind the verse itself, is to have equality instead of instead of having hierarchies of systems,
Right.
where you have people being behind all the time and some people being in front, where the people in front eventually get behind with the people that are behind, and eventually they have equality as a society.
Yep. Yeah, and that's the funny thing, though. It's like Christ never advocated for classes in a society, right? He says all the believers are one, all of you are one within me, and it's like feed my lambs, and it's like he's the shepherd, we're all the sheep. There's no indication that we're supposed to be dominated by others, and so the funny thing, it's even when Trent Horn brings up the example that there's an abbot at a monastery, or like an abbess in charge of a convent of nuns, it's like the abbot and the pope are the same idea. It's first among equals. So that's the funny thing, right? They understand that real Christianity has this concept that like we're all equal. And George Orwell made fun of communism with the book Animal Farm. Because the pigs are running the whole thing, and so the pigs are have the phrase everyone is equal, but some people are more equal than others. So that's the thing, though. Christianity has this ideal because the Pope is supposed to be first among equals, and here too, like a bishop or an abbot of a monastery he's not the master, he's not the boss,
for example.
right? Christ is the master, Christ is the boss. We're all equals as believers at the end of the day. Just the abbot is in the position, he's in the position of Christ because his job is to administer. So that's the thing. Christianity already has this ideal that we're all equal, just some people are more equal than others. I mean, Orwell was making fun of socialism when it said that, but and I just want to push back against any reactionary who might be watching this later. And so yeah, Ayn Rand writes in her book that the Soviet Union was more concerned about maintaining its prestige, and that's why they ate caviar every night. The ambassadors of the Soviet Union, and it's like that's the problem. The Soviet Union had its own set of elites, and they were enriching themselves. So the thing is that just you can't point to a true capitalist system, you can't point to a true communist system in that sense, and that's where the fact comes in, is that
Soviet Union was still way better than like any
right, they had a
US
superior society. But I'm just saying, though, like in my society there is no way that the ambassadors would be eating caviar. Like you get
everyone shall be eating caviar.
We shouldn't eat that much caviar. But I'm saying you get your
Well, I mean,
eggs and
like the
you get your
analogy, we should all be eating
yeah.
equally as good.
Right. So this is the analogy I would give is that you get your eggs and you get your steak, maybe like it's gonna be a chop steak or whatever. It's not gonna be like a T-bone every night. But yeah, you get your eggs and you get your meat, whatever, bacon or turkey bacon, and it's gonna be that just enough to eat, like one meal of meat a day. The rest of it could be, lentils or bread and baguettes and croissants or whatever else. But you don't get to eat you don't get to eat caviar and steak every night. No. So don't try to point. So Ayn Rand tried to smear the Soviet Union by saying that. And so yeah, at some point the Soviet Union became more concerned with its own prestige. There's no prestige in my system. you eat you eat okay, and it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be
The
like
best Ayn Rand could have contributed to society was not writing anything at all. That's the best she could have
I
done.
mean, she had her own point of view. We'll talk about her. We could do a whole show about her because I've read all her literature.
That
Have you
doesn't
read
matter.
her?
No,
You should
don't
read
want
her.
to. I know she's garbage.
I mean, let's just.
I know the
She's very interesting.
I know
Ironically,
Jordan Peterson
I
worships.
I knew she was wrong, and I found the truth by just inverting everything she said. But
Oh,
she
like
is
you
good.
reverse everything she says and like use it
Right.
against her. Yeah, that's smart.
No, I mean, you just take her philosophy and you do the opposite. Like one of her rules is that there's no such thing as a gift, and as a theist, my thing is that everything is a gift from God. So that's why you're a capitalist and you're a materialist, but I'm not. But I'm talking about Ayn Rand. So but what I was saying about prestige, look, there's no such thing as prestige in a communist society, and that's the thing. And like the funny thing is, when Trent Horner was like, "Oh well, I could say capitalism's never been practiced because like the owners there's never been a system where the owners always take care of their workers." Like, wait, that's the definition of capitalism now, where like the owners take care of their workers. Like nobody ever said that. You defined capitalism before as the defense of private property. So it's like perfect capitalism is when you're allowed to own as much as you want, even if it's, destroying society and everyone else. And yes, we already live in that. And yes, China is already living in that because they're like the largest capitalist power in the world.
Exactly.
It's state capitalism. That's what China is.
Yeah, I mean, like China. I mean, they engage with like trade to the U.S., for example.
Yeah, I mean,
I have
they
no idea how
use
people can
money and loans to like trap other countries and buy up their ports and their infrastructure that they're building for them. So it's like basically I'm giving you a loan so I could take over your country, just like the World Bank, basically.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, like the banks are. Don't even get me started. Disgusting,
Yeah.
bourgeois garbage. Typical.
Yeah, I hear you. So, comrade, I'll give you the last word because I did speak a majority of this conversation.
I think,
But I just want to thank you so much for coming on and agreeing
problem.
to host the channel with me. I really want to make good content for everybody out there, and my comrade here is very knowledgeable and he has a lot of good facts. And we really want to challenge this reactionary groupthink that's taken over Christianity, that you must be conservative and you must be for capitalism. And for the two biggest Catholic channels to come together and just completely obfuscate the issues of what capitalism is and what communism is and what socialism was something that really needed to be answered. And to me, it was like really important to address the thing that was being discussed, because like I said, the first time I watched it, I was a little nervous. And then the second time I watched it, I was like, wait a minute. Everything they're saying is like smoke and mirrors to deceive people. And everything's a deception that easily falls apart if you just pull back the curtain.
Yeah, exactly. If you actually look into things deeper and like, I mean, like you don't actually just blindly like accept it. If you really listen to like a lot of conservative arguments, they're terrible deep down. They're all actually factually incorrect. They're morally incorrect, philosophically and ethically. Though that would be philosophically, but yeah, ethically it falls apart.
Yeah, morally, philosophically, intellectually, there's no basis for it. And the only way that you can
everything.
And the only way you can make a basis for it is if you're going to give people half facts. Like, look at that car in East Germany. It couldn't even, shake the gas by itself. And it's like, yeah, well, capitalism has produced dangerous and deadly cars that have killed people. So you could laugh all you want about how East German production was, and cars just about blueprints and discipline. Like we can just use the factories and like the BMW factory in Germany by its headquarters is like 95% robotics. The people are just watching. There's like just one person in the factory basically, or maybe five, just standing around basically. So robotics is at a point where um we can make cars for the world so cheaply that like you wouldn't even need to
I have
um
a question for conservatives. Have you ever wondered why a lot of Nazis, fascists, same thing, racists, you ever wonder why they always support capitalism or Republican parties, conservative parties? Like, have you ever just sat down and wondered that? Could it be that
yeah,
the parties they support inherently are built upon those values they support, like
yeah,
fascism, racism, inequality,
exploitation, yeah,
etc.? I mean, like, these are things that the system itself, capitalism, is built upon, and
perpetuating.
at its height, it's pure fascism, and that's what
Yeah,
capitalism is. Nazi,
you're right. I
Nazis.
mean, let's just define that though. It's like you're under somebody else's boot. That's what that totalitarianism is.
Yeah, I mean, like I call a lot of people who like support capitalism or like billionaires and stuff like tax breaks. I call them bootlickers. That's what they are, bootlickers. Like they're literally bootlickers. I mean, like they're under the boots of the
Yeah,
system and they lick it. I mean,
right, exactly. I mean, now I understand why you use that term so much. I didn't understand it because at the time. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's like you and I remember when I was a Republican, I would argue with my friend who liked this leftist rock band. And I'm like, wait, aren't you like biting the hand that feeds you? Because it's like, how are you making albums that are being distributed by like a corporate distribution chain? And it's like, yeah, well, okay, in the corporate world, the only way you can get your message out is by signing a record deal. Otherwise, you're not going to get your music out. So yes, if you want to get your message out and make money as a musician, you're forced to do that. But under my system, people who make music would just be able to freely express themselves. In fact, music wouldn't be something that somebody in Nashville or New York or LA does who signed a record deal. Music is something we all do. We like my best friend went to Cuba like within the past 2 or 3 years, and he said like because they don't have internet, everybody comes out at night and they all just like play the banjo on the sidewalk and violin or whatever. Like music is on the streets. Music is a popular thing. It's a people's thing, and it's only under capitalism where music is like from one of the three major cities that produce records, and everybody else, they don't have music. Like only New York and Atlanta, and maybe Atlanta, but Nashville. All the country music's coming out of Nashville. Like really, that's all
yeah,
the
I
people
mean,
that make
like
music.
for example, in Jesus's days, you could probably go swimming, get baptized in any old river like you wanted to do, go fishing anywhere, right? Under capitalism, you can't go to any old lake or river. Sometimes you have to pay. Sometimes there's regulations. There's security guards. You can't get passed by if you can't pay. These are things that are happening under capitalism. Under communism, there won't be those things happening. You can go anywhere you want. There's the natural resources that everyone has equal access to, not some weirdo dude who came out there one day, decided to claim it, and now you have to pay to come in there and use it. And natural resource that somebody arbitrarily claimed.
Yep. Well, I mean, there will be some regulations. Like you can't overfish in a pond.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously some regulations that collectively, as a society, we are going to agree. We're going to say, hey, for us as a society, these things are going to be better for us. We should aim to do these things rather than these things. And we vote on it. Not one dude making the decisions for everyone, whether it's bad or good. And we just have to stick with it. That's ridiculous. That's like, ugh, I mean, like, I don't. Capitalism is like really anti like ideas and like democracy in general. I feel like it really is.
Yep. I totally agree. Yeah, and our first viewer said that we were having a great discussion, so we already got a fan.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, comrade, for coming on and making our first podcast. I think that's very successful. And like I said, if you're a capitalist and you want to come on and you want to tell us where we're wrong, I am so open. So that's going to be my running challenge. Anybody wants to come on and say this is where we have smeared capitalism or we misunderstand capitalism and how like you would make it a better system, please come on, because I don't think like I've been I'm pretty like I said, I used to be a conservative capitalist libertarian, and having seen how the world really is and all the judgments that capitalists make on people, like poor people are lazy and lazy people are uneducated and dumb. So it's like none of that is true. The capitalists just need a reason to feel superior to other people, and that's the whole game, is that you need somebody below you, and that's why you're grateful for like the Lexus in your garage, and that or the Mercedes makes you feel that much better. But that is something you're being given crumbs on the table. Even if you have a nice big house with a nice big garage, that's just crumbs on the table of how much you're being exploited probably, and how much you're making somebody else rich. So under our system, you wouldn't be making anyone else rich. You would just be making the world a better place, but with responsible and ethical governing. And also, yes, the price of meat and certain things would go up, but that's just because, capitalism is just cutting corners left and right to make a profit. So all of that would stop. So yes, there's going to be some more expenses involved, because we're not just going to let people fall through the cracks and animals be exploited and people be abused. And yeah, you're not going to get your college basketball like as much because you may have to pay the athletes, and you can't build as many stadiums. Instead of building science laboratories, we're building like arenas. So yes, all the stupid things that capitalists spend their money on, that's all going to end. And I'm very sorry if like your job is making cakes for $2,000 for rich people, for their 6-year-old's $16,000 birthday party. I'm sorry, but yes, we are going to stop that.
Yes, because like there's like certain things that are just unnecessary that are hindering the progress of society, and a lot of the things that are happening under capitalism currently that just are really unnecessary.
Yeah, they don't believe in looking out for your fellow man. Not once, I think, in that entire discussion. Like, I believe in a welfare state, but it's like you don't believe in making sure nobody falls through the cracks. Like, you're just saying, "Oh, I believe in a welfare state, but
A
I don't
lot of
want
their
Sweden.
arguments were
I don't want Sweden."
an appeal to
Okay.
selfishness. I feel like it's like, oh well,
Yeah.
it's like I'm gonna like lose these certain things. Like,
Yeah.
oh well, if I'm a billionaire, like I might lose this money. Like I
Right.
might lose a lot of greed and power. Like that's a pretty bad
Right.
thing. No, it's a good thing because like you're exploiting people. You're causing a massive inequality. It's just a lot of disgusting things going on by greedy billionaires.
And here's the thing: if you want to say you believe
The
in
working
selfishness, that's
conditions,
fine.
etc.
But why are you saying that's Christianity? Because that's not what our Lord Jesus Christ preached.
Yeah, the fact you have Jeff Bezos who's spending millions of dollars to prevent workers from getting a few extra bucks and an extra break to eat is so ridiculous.
He's the richest person in the world. He's the biggest billionaire.
He's
If the price of Amazon goes up like to another high, then like he's above Bill Gates in terms of net worth.
Yeah, I have no idea how anyone can think that that's okay. Why should he exist? What does he contribute? He contributes
Bernie sent out an amazing tweet. Like, these billionaires have made like $5,000 a minute since the pandemic started, and
What
like
does
people
Elon
are.
Musk contribute? By the way, he doesn't do anything. He's literally like some wannabe Tony Stark who's used as a public figure by the people who
I don't know.
make
I'm kind of.
decisions for Tesla.
I like the guy. I don't know why.
Again, people like
Like
him because he
going to
comes off as
Mars
like
is a good goal. Like I
yes,
don't like
again,
in a
like he's
capitalist
used
system.
as this person to have cool, innovative ideas. He doesn't
Yeah,
actually contribute anything. Like
I know.
he'll
Well,
probably be like,
he happened to be
"Oh,
there
we
at the
should
beginning
make
of PayPal,
Starship pointy
and
to
now
make it look
he's
cool."
filthy rich. Yeah.
Like I feel like when people really think like he's literally like Tony Stark in there, like building things bare hand, like he's doing calculations in his head, doing
He
physics
does
and
encourage that
calculus.
image. Yeah, I mean, he's
Like
inventing the
he
arc
really like
reactor or
people
whatever.
genuinely like a lot of fascists
Yeah.
like him for some reason as well. Like a lot of conservatives love Elon Musk. They love him. You don't wonder. I
No,
wonder
you're right.
why
He has that cult of, and he builds that aura of Tony Stark around him, and
Yeah, like
obviously he's.
the only thing he probably contributes to his company is once all the workers are done doing everything, he probably comes in there and says, we should make rocket pointy to look cool. Bye." And he
Yeah,
takes
and
credit
the
for everything.
engineers and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And like
but
and when its products fail, he blames the workers, then of course, then yeah, it's not his fault.
Yeah. I think like it reminded me of something foolish that Trent had said. And it was something like, I forgot, like all the progress happens under capitalism or something. It's like, well, you know what, like, and I used to believe that too when I was a conservative, but like my best friend told me about a conversation once, like, no, inventors invent because they like it. Like they like tinkering with things and creating new things. And I remember like another family friend, he was like, well, corporations do all the pharmaceutical research and make all the drugs. I'm like, wait a minute. There's like universities, there's government things.
Yeah,
Like
exactly. Like
there's people who want to discover cures because they're that
you
smart.
go to any kindergarten classroom or any like Richard Feynman said something like, or was it Carl Sagan? Like any kindergarten, nursery, grade one classroom, you ask those kids what they want to do or what they like. A lot of them will give answers that are sounding so great. You ask them 10 years, 12 years later what they want to be. Oh, I don't know. Oh, whatever makes me the most money. Oh, I'm stressed and I don't want to live life. Like, what the heck happens? Like, this is what capitalism does. It discourages thinking. It discourages people being
Yep.
creative. Only
Right.
certain people make it, and makes people
Right.
scared,
Those who have
thinking,
bourgeois privilege and bourgeois
yeah,
parents. Yeah.
exactly. And the rare ones who do make it, they come up with this bullshit story like, "Oh, I woke up at 2 a.m. If you wake up 2 hours later than me, I
Yeah.
have 2 hours advantage of you to work. That's why I became a billionaire." And it's like then they sell like all these dumb books of like why you should wake up at 2 a.m., the 12 secrets of life, what you're missing out, what they don't teach you in school. Like like all bourgeois propaganda they spew at you, and they get paid for it because they contribute nothing to society but propagating propaganda to people into thinking that capitalism is good, which is why there's no revolution going on, is because people still believe that. Like,
Yeah.
the West takes part in propaganda. Like, I'm pretty sure my
Yeah.
grandpa said when he moved here from Yugoslavia, and he started saying like how he thinks communism is a good a system. People started like getting mad at him, and like he literally said that, like they're like basically like brainwashed into thinking what how
Yeah.
communism was, what Yugoslavia was, or whatever, and like
Right.
they didn't actually know what it was like at all, or like anything,
Right.
and they were told lies by the
Yeah.
Western propaganda news people
Right.
and the government.
Yeah, I agree. But we mentioned Ayn Rand before. I may as well go into it because I just wanted to give a point to socialists. Is that Ayn Rand is the most effective propagandist for capitalism who ever lived, and her books Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead influenced me deeply when I was in my 20s, and I really thought like like the company should own every square inch of the earth and every cubic foot of air, because like that would result in and like every centiliter, every cubic liter of water in the rivers on God's green earth. And it's because like that would be like a better way to distribute it. And I realized though, like the reason she's such an effective propagandist is because her family was like a middle class pharmacy during the Bolshevik Revolution, and then they took away her father's pharmacy, and they basically made her family destitute. And then when she immigrated to the U.S., she really hated communism so much that like she came out with all this propaganda. So my thing is like, if the Bolsheviks were just a little bit nicer, we would not have given the capitalists this like nuclear weapon of a propagandist, which like brainwashed like hundreds of millions of people over the past 50 years. And so like what is really important is to make sure like any kind of revolution, for me, ideally any revolution would be nonviolent, and it would be democratic and peaceful. And so the reason is because if we just go full French Revolution and Robespierre and off with their heads, like that kind of tyranny, it was called the Reign of Terror under Robespierre, right?
I
So I think that's
honestly
what people
think the
fear.
Bolshevik
So
Revolution is good.
okay, but did you hear what I said though? It's like you made somebody poor, and then they came to America and they brainwashed people against communism. So that was the
No, I'm
stupidest thing.
saying like
If they had just not made her family poor, she would have been a communist. Maybe she would have written beautiful communist literature. But instead, because they were like messing with the middle class and just like it's funny because I see this guy who does a wonderful history of Stalin. He points out like one of the problems with Stalin was that like it was called the kulaks, right? So like they would be against like the middle class peasants. Okay, you had the serfs, who had like the peasants who had no money or power. But then you had the kulaks, who were like the ones with like, okay, you didn't have one cow, you had like maybe 5 cows. So at a certain point, Stalinism demonized the people who had 5 cows.
Yeah,
And
like, oh, the
so
kulaks
it's
were
like,
hoarding all the food or whatever. Like, yeah,
yeah, it's like, like, I mean, I like the real ruling class is the Tsar and his nobles, right? Like it's not the people with like 10 cows,
bourgeois.
So yeah, and so that's the thing. Like we really need to make sure that the middle class and upper middle class, right? Not upper middle class. The middle class is not our enemy, and they have nothing to lose but their chains also. Because this is the
Alright,
funny thing
guys.
about America. This is the funny thing about America. This is the last sentence I'll say, is that people think just because like they own a nice house that they're like set, but like you don't understand that like you're $500,000 up to your eyeballs in debt. Like you're not free, bro. Like you're in wage slavery, just like the person in public housing is who lives in a slum. Like you're in the same trap because you're up to your eyeballs in debt. Don't think you have it set.
Yeah, by the way, when we're talking about the bourgeois, we're not talking about people who own 2 cars and we're going to send you to gulags. No, we're talking about people who are like millionaires and billionaires who own like literally everything and have the most power and influence. That's what we're talking about when we talk about like the bourgeois. We're not talking about we're not talking about your average neighbor who owns a Mercedes Benz in another car. Like, no, we're not going to send them to gulags for that. Like, it's ridiculous. No, like, the average
Yeah.
conservative probably thinks that's what communism is.
Yeah,
Like, literally, that's
exactly,
what they
right?
think it is. Like, seriously.
They really, I mean, but that's the fear. That's the fear
They
that the
think somebody's
capitalists
gonna
will
come in there
use,
with
is
an
that like,
Ushanka hat with the USSR star in the middle and the AK-47, and they're gonna start gunning people down and like taking people away. That's not what's gonna happen. Like, it's ridiculous. It's a conspiratorial nonsense, like, view to even hold. And I see that view held a lot. Like, literally, just today, I saw like some apologist saying socialism is when people come and kill you. Like, literally, like.
yep, yep, exactly. So, and by the way, the historian of Stalin, his name is Stephen Kotkin, and he's written like a 3-volume biography of Stalin. The third volume is still coming out, but he has all these amazing lectures on YouTube that just talk about Stalin. But so like that's the thing though. See, communism has made many mistakes, and also, like I said, it's the autocrats, it's the various things that power works out to. It's no different than the fact that, like, for example, look at India. It had a great ruler in Gandhi to be, one of the leaders of the revolution, a nonviolent pacifist. Look at America, right? George Washington denied the crown. Like like they offered to make him King George, and he said like, I'm not going to be a king. So if you have like selfless leaders, your country will turn out a good way. But for example, in my lifetime, you have the Palestinian Authority that was headed by Yasser Arafat. And, he might have been a good, leftist militant back in the 70s or 60s, arguably not. But by the end of it, he was just an ineffectual leader who had signed a peace deal with Israel and given away all his power. So the thing is that when you have and he was very corrupt too. So when you have somebody who's corrupt, that will obviously derail any newborn country. So there's such a thing as corruption in any a new movement, new country, and it just depends on your leaders. And sometimes history gives you lucky leaders, and you have a successful thing. But otherwise, we'd have King Joe Biden and King Donald Trump, today. So we don't have kings just because George Washington made the right decision. And so that's the same thing with Stalin and Mao. It's like they made poor decisions, and just that doesn't disprove the idea that like socialism can work. And actually, we've already proven that capitalism doesn't work. So the question isn't does socialism work? The question is, what is the system that will best alleviate all the suffering and destruction created by capitalism, which doesn't work.
Hey man, but didn't you know that Venezuela had starving
Yeah.
people and that
I
the
know,
USSR
right?
killed people? I mean, that's like
Yeah,
that's what the conservatives will say
I
to you.
know.
You'll give them
It's weird.
anything, and the
It's
same
weird.
little parties will be like,
Yeah.
uh,
I've said it to you before. Like
Hugo
Chavez was
Chavez.
good, and it's
Hugo Chavez was
it's
based
been
with a good
mismanaged by
leader.
Maduro. But like Chavez never fired on his own people even once.
Hugo
And I don't
Chavez
know.
was a
To me,
great
he's a
man.
hero. He's a hero to me.
Think of Castro, good man.
And the first thing he did was like he passed a constitutional amendment to help protect the indigenous people of Venezuela. So, and here's another thing: like when he wanted to change the education system to be socialist, all the middle class, upper middle class families in Venezuela protested it, and he undid the reforms. So he's not a dictator. He
No,
he
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 wasn't.
listened to his people. He was a beautiful man, and I'm really sorry that he passed
Evo
away.
Morales as well wasn't a dictator. Okay, the workers had so much power under Evo Morales, it was ridiculous. Okay, he
Yeah,
wasn't an
and
evil
I
dictator.
wanna talk about like Imelda Marcos, who her and her husband like they were supported by the U.S. and they built military bases in the Philippines, and she had like what 800 pairs of shoes. So it's like it's this disgusting thing. Capitalism creates a ruling class. That ruling class collaborates with the imperialists, and it exploits all the resources of that poor country. And like the Philippines is so poor that like most of its money comes from nurses working overseas and sending back money in remittances, and the Filipino government takes like 40% of that money or 30%. So it's like it's a sick system where you create this desperate poverty and then like you exploit the desperate people even more.
For sure.
That's all it is. And like I can't believe like my eyes and ears, like they were almost like suffering because it's like I'm listening to two of the biggest Christian apologists like not even talk about any flaws of capitalism. It's just we want to protect private property. That's what it is. And it's like
No, what?
no, it's not. That's not what it's about. And it's so funny that his analogy has to be a second home. It's like, yeah, people have like 3, 4, like, here's the crazy thing I learned. The majority of apartments in Manhattan, New York's so expensive, are owned by, this is before the pandemic, are owned by absentee landlords. And so like nobody's even living in those apartments, but just the rich are, like real estate is often used for money laundering because you can open up a shell corporation and just like buy it. So, and just like buy something that'll hold wealth. So a majority of the apartments in Manhattan are completely empty. And I read that the World Cup people, they had uh there was a bribery scandal to have like Qatar in the World Cup, basically also South Africa. So every country that's been had the World Cup pretty much paid off the FIFA executives,
Exploited
and they
terribly, massively
yeah
bad working conditions to the point where massive amounts of workers have died building
right
things for the World Cup. And there are people
right.
out there who are probably going to boycott the World Cup,
Your
possibly.
sound's a little muffled, but I just want to finish one sentence. Is that like I learned that the one of the biggest VPs of the soccer federation, he owned an apartment in Manhattan in Trump Plaza, Trump the Trump Tower off Central Park, Columbus Circle, which is the most Trump International. That's what it's called, and that apartment was just for his cats. And it's like, I'm trying to buy a house here and I didn't have enough money to make a down payment. And like, dudes are buying luxury apartments for their cats. And like,
Why
that's
can't
the
somebody
system
live
in
there
which you
for
live in.
free and take care of his
I know,
cats?
right?
I mean, like,
I know, right? It's like, but no, obviously, why would a capitalist worry about that? There's no social obligations under capitalism. What is this, Christianity? Am I my brother's keeper?
yeah, it's like just.
Actually, I'm glad I said that. But what were you saying about FIFA? That workers die?
Yeah, they exploited massive amounts of workers, and like the working conditions itself were super bad. Like for building the stadiums.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really bad. It was really immoral.
Yeah, and like I said, these executives are all getting filthy rich off of these bribes, and it's like and again, like this is to put money in the pockets of the elite. This is all just deluding people with the bread and circuses. But that's my thing. It's like it's really weird to hear people try to like, I was talking about am I my brother's keeper. So the first question that occurs in the book of Genesis and therefore the Bible is Cain asking, am I my brother's keeper? And I read one exegesis, a commentary on the scripture, and it's like the idea is that like Cain is asking this because he's a bad guy, and so the answer is yes, you are your brother's keeper. And if you're a capitalist, you're denying that central tenet that we have to look out for each other, because it's just like
Exactly.
this is why Trent Horn didn't continue that analogy. What if a family's home and it's their only home, and you're in the woods and you don't have any food to eat, and is that family obligated to give you food? And it's like, I think they would, I think they really are morally obligated, and yet under capitalism there's no legal kind of obligation. And
Exactly.
so therefore, because there's no legal obligation, there's nothing anyone can do if you decide not to feed somebody who's dying on the street, like in front of your doorstep.
Yeah, like,
And
exactly.
that's wrong. That's unchristian. And so therefore a Christian cannot be a capitalist.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like I said, just expand his analogy to the total sum amount of homeless people in the country. And how about we say, okay, now according to your analogy, we have to now just adds it up to the total amount of homeless people. Therefore, with his analogy and with
we should occupy all the empty mansions in the country.
We should have a system. We should abolish the system right now, capitalism, and substitute.
No, well, I mean,
for
like just the analogy though, right? If you're allowed to take over something just for an emergency, then frankly, if you have like hundreds of thousands of homeless people in the richest country in the world, then we need to take all of these abandoned luxury buildings.
Or say the system itself causes that, right? Can you just say,
yeah, I hear you.
Causes that, you have the right to abolish that system in place.
Right. Definitely, the system that causes the starvation. Sure, yeah.
Exactly. You need to go to the root of it. What's the root of the cause? The system itself. Change the system. The problem will be solved. Exactly. I mean, like, that's the truth to it. Which is why I don't think capitalism ever fix anything.
And it's so funny because on YouTube, like, there's all these videos of like people giving like $500 to a homeless person or something, and then they do like more crowd fundraisers. And see, this is the band-aid that like capitalism allows us. That like, okay, if I gave like I'm saying help the poor or whatever, but I'm just saying though, like the thing that people will do is they'll watch a video like that where the bodega guy gives like $5 to like a poor kid or whatever, and it's like you'll think that's alleviating the poverty, but it's like, no, that's just so you feel good and you don't worry about it. But what you really need to worry about is, are you participating in a system which is fundamentally immoral? Because we all are.
Yeah. And like what are you doing?
My anarchist friend said this. All our phones are made by slaves in China or South Korea.
Yeah,
like facts.
Yeah, exactly. I think like we're all taking part in an immoral system, right? But what are we doing to prevent that system from succeeding? If one person is not doing anything about it, in fact, they're basically endorsing the system to the point where they think it's the best system. They're actively not only supporting the system, but they're a part of the system itself in such a way that like they're one of the main guidelines for making people stuck in the system itself. And that's why I don't like reactionaries in general with this, is because they prevent progress. And without progress, you're going to be stuck within a bad system that causes massive inequality, homeless crisis, health crises, mental illness crisis, like literally everything you can think of. It's ridiculous. Racism, like especially racism, police brutality, like literally everything. Like it's just.
I mean, one of the biggest things is that like all these puppy mills, and like they raise animals and they breed the animals so that they can sell the puppies for like $5,000 to like rich and famous and like well-to-do types. And it's like a lot of times because you're breeding these puppies to be like abnormally small or abnormally interbred with their like own siblings and stuff, they have these genetic conditions. They die within days or weeks or months, and they die painful deaths because like you're not following nature. And it's like and like there's all these animals in shelters that need homes, but like the rich have us, the celebrities have us buying like the poodles that fit in your purse, and like this is like you're that wouldn't be necessary in a system that wasn't driven by profit. You would just have animals that like are naturally healthy. It's like the system fails in every way. I can't think of a single way in which the system succeeds. And if you want to say, I mean, I said it before, like, okay, fine, you could build up the industry of a country very quickly with capitalism. But again, that means like you're paying workers like $1 an hour. You're not caring about their safety. You're not caring about if okay, your arm gets chopped off, let me hire someone new, and I don't care what happens to you. So it's like it's just ridiculous I think it's ridiculous.
I mean, Stalin's 5-year plan. They did have really good success though under it, the 5-year plan.
Yeah.
Yugoslavia's 5-year plan was fairly successful as well. But yeah, I mean, I think rapid industrial industry can help build a society, but I feel like once it reaches a certain pinnacle, you have to change it in some way.
Yep. Our viewer in the chat wrote, there's a quote, America isn't the land of the haves and have-nots. America is the land of the haves and soon to haves. I have another one. So it is
Capitalism is fascism in decay. Vladimir Lenin. That's my quote.
true. I got this. I just wanted to put it in the chat. So a British BBC historian said, America is like the French Revolution in reverse, where the mobs come pouring down the streets, screaming, more power to the aristocracy. So I think that's a good quote to end it on, but you could add anything, comrade.
Oh, no. I mean, like, capitalism has neither the ethics nor the morality to solve the problems of homelessness. Is something that Fidel Castro said as well, actually, along those lines. I don't have the quote pulled up, but like it's like really similar to that, though. It's like capitalism doesn't have the ethics nor the morality to solve the problems of homelessness, or it's like a really beautiful
or anything. Yeah, it's designed to have that going on. Like,
it says
if you gave everybody a
has,
home, housing prices would like collapse.
Yeah, I said the quote right. It's like capitalism has neither the capacity nor the morality nor the ethics to solve the problems of poverty. Fidel Castro. That was a very beautiful quote to end it on.
I feel like next time, because there was the last 10 minutes of that video with Trent Horn and Matt Fradd about the Black Lives Matter and social justice. And he says, like, social justice, there's no systemic injustice in America because, like, we don't have Jim Crow anymore. So I just want to deconstruct that, because and I feel like that needs its own, like, 1 hour conversation. And actually, we're going on 2 hours, 15 minutes here, which is pretty great because, you know, this stuff needed to be refuted. But I feel like it's a whole nother hour that we could do unpacking privilege and the way systemic injustice works in America, because that's clueless if you think there's no systemic injustice in America.
Yeah, you're actually just denying objective, peer-reviewed, studied facts, and if you deny that, you're pushing bourgeois
it's
agenda.
the same thing. You know, they have these blinders on, and not only do they not know history, they don't want to know all this history, and they don't want to know all the facts, because if you know all the facts, then you get into trouble. So they want to cherry pick. Right, they want to cherry pick stuff to, like, encourage their and it's by the way, it's the echo chamber that feeds them quite handsomely, you know. So they're not doing Christ work here, you know. They were you're right. They're not doing Christ work here. They're just doing the work of their capitalist overlords, and that's why it's a very sinister and despicable video that they made, because they basically hoodwinked their whole audience into believing lies about the system that they live in and the system that is the alternative. You know, they just
hood for a bunch of idiots and, like, evil, like, dictators.
We want to, like, we just want to steal stuff just so, like, we could get rich.
Yeah, we want to steal stuff because we hate rich people because we're not good enough and we're too stupid, apparently. Because that's literally what their arguments boil down to at the most fundamental level. Like most capitalist arguments I've heard, they boil down to we're lazy, stupid, hate the rich, and we're not good enough. Literally, that's it. It's not that we're actually ethical. We care about poor people. We want a system where there's equality rather than inequality, because equality is objectively better than inequality. And by equality, we don't mean we mean equity with that as well, because we do realize according to their abilities, according to their needs, because that's a thing that we're very committed to, because it's based on what Jesus taught and what Marx taught as well, and that's
what the apostles taught.
Yeah, exactly. And Marx taught it as well, and it's a very good idea. And I think that everyone should agree with it because it's an objectively morally good thing to agree with.
Yep. And I want to invite any capitalist who wants to come debate. And just to make it fair, I think two capitalists should be able to come on, right? So it's two capitalists and two socialists. And but I would like anyone who considers himself a Christian capitalist to please go into this for me. The quote from Acts: "From each according to his ability, and to each according to his need." And so let me find that Bible verse, but
There's
I
like an
need
Acts.
yeah, 2 or something, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm on like some biblical like master, but I think it's like to each according to his needs. Also, in Acts, I think 4:35. Yeah, like to
Okay.
each according to his need, distributed. Like unto him. Yeah, like unto them. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it is biblically taught. I mean, like
Yep. Yeah, Acts 11:29, each according to his abilities. What?
yeah, it's on Christian
And by
communism.
the way, here, Christ says you cannot serve both God and mammon, which is money.
Yeah,
So,
wait, it's on Christian
so look at
communism
that.
Wikipedia page. Yeah,
Right. So you're right. So it's like if you think, oh, it's in Acts chapter 2. Here, so we'll start off with Acts chapter 2 if you want to debate us, and you can bring your capitalist homie on. But all who believed were together and had all things in common. That sounds like communism. Aren't you against? What about private property? Didn't the Pope support private property? And they would sell their possessions. This is what the saints did. So look at what your religion is telling you to do and admire. They would sell their possessions and goods and distribute the proceeds to all, as had any need. So there's no private property in the earliest form of Christianity, which is the true one. Now the whole group of those who believe were of one heart and soul. So there also needs to be spiritual communion between the believers. There can't just be like ideology. And no one claimed private ownership of any possessions. Should I read that again? No one claimed private ownership of any possessions. These are the apostles, the holiest people you hold in history. By the way, another quote that I remember, there's a quote about Christ. Christ says this about himself. He says, "For the birds of the sky have their foxes, the badgers of the ground have their holes." Sorry. "The birds of the sky have their nests, the foxes of the ground have their holes, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." What does that mean? That means Christ was homeless. Like the person you worship as the greatest man in all of history and the incarnation of God was a homeless person who you would turn your back on today. So I'm glad he's not living today, because you wouldn't even let him go inside the manger. You would just let him, be born on the street. And but everything they owned was held in common. There was not a needy person among them, for as many as owned lands or houses sold them and bought the proceeds of what was sold, and they laid it at the feet of the apostles, and it was distributed to each as had any need. So here's the system of Christianity. You have to provide everyone with what they need. And I think I'm the only one here now, but you got it. Hey, welcome back, guys.
I heard everything you said. I was just waiting for you. I accidentally
yeah.
I accidentally exited off. But I heard everything you said though. Everything.
Yeah, so I just need if you're gonna come on here and to talk to Comrade and myself, then you can bring your capitalist homie, and we will start off with that. But I don't see how there's any way you can be a Christian and a capitalist. Contradiction, oxymoron, hypocrisy, and damnable heresy. That's what capitalism is. Because it's an ideology that's dependent upon just destroying morality and destroying how righteous people should live, and it's anti-Christian at its core. Yeah, I mean, but here's the thing: fascism is just an epithet, So it's like anything you don't like is a fascist. So I'd rather talk about, yeah. I mean, we can. Why don't you define fascism for us?
Well, I mean, like when I think of fascism, it's like literally like capitalism at its like height, using like power to control people, to suppress people. Like for example, Mussolini, Hitler, like those are like fascists. You know what I mean?
No, hold on. That's the thing, though. So fascism is state control of the economy for like Okay,
Yeah.
this in political science, right?
Well, it's a
Fascism is the
broad term.
radicalized.
It's not like so specific. I mean, like,
Yeah, but here's the thing. I asked you what is capitalism, you said it's fascism. And then when I asked you what is fascism, you said it's a height of capitalism. So, like I said, we should really be able to define our terms and also elevate the discourse a little bit. And by the way, I have the advantage of a bachelor's degree in political science, so I don't mean to be so hard on you. But fascism is the radicalization of the middle class. And we can chew on that and discuss that other time. But my advice to you though would just be, instead of saying capitalism is fascism,
couldn't you say
fascism
that
is
capitalism
capitalism.
does that though?
Does what?
It radicalizes the middle class in some aspects.
Yeah, that's what. Oh, I mean, it creates a middle class. Wait, no, I mean not necessarily, because they weren't. Yeah, I mean they weren't radical per se, but like that's interesting. No, because under regular capitalism, the middle class is like docile. And then, like you said, fascism is the height of capitalism. But what I'm saying is, though, my thing is, right, is that,
But you
like,
can say the average capitalist would support fascist tendencies, though. Would you can say that though, right?
capitalism does have fascist tendencies. But what I'm saying is, though, right, most of the time, it's just like using the word, what is it? Collectivism, right? Like the capitalists will say, well, I'm against collectivism. And it's like, well, you believe in a worldwide church, so you're kind of collectivist in that sense, right? Because everyone shares. But so it's just a weird. We just have a weird way of like slurring the other side, and I would rather actually engage in a heavy critique. I mean, in other words, I mean, again, it's just a matter of words, so I'm not going to really pick on you over this. But I'd rather say capitalism is exploitation at its core, rather than just calling it fascism. Because at some point, fascism is just someone you don't like. But we know what exploitation is. Exploitation is a very specific phenomenon where you squeeze someone like a lemon. So.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I agree. But I mean, I just say fascism because like most fascists are like right leaning, and yeah, I mean, like that I've come across. I mean, like they're all right.
Yeah, it is a right wing kind of. I mean, see, fascism is really interesting because it basically is right wing authoritarianism, but it's a funny way to put it because. Yeah, so I mean, capitalism is not inherently authoritarian, but it can become authoritarian.
Well, I mean, like I think well, you can say corporatism is like authoritarian in some aspect at its most fundamental level.
Well, I mean, so corporatism isn't ruled by the corporations, because corporatism specifically means basically you have special interests and labor unions at the same table. So you'd have, and that is part of fascism too, because they had unions and they had the bosses of the factories, and then you have the state at the table mediating between them. So yeah, that's the thing. Fascism is the government controlling the unions and the government controlling the corporations, and then basically building a war economy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
that's how it was practiced in Germany, at least.
Yeah,
But like, my thing is, right, I mean, I remember I was on Facebook. I'm not on Facebook anymore, but I just had friends in college, and remember I was a Republican at the time. So, they would always point out to me, like, people use the word fascist the same as totalitarian. And like, sometimes when they mean fascist, they mean just like totalitarian, or like, so it's like, there's differences between the terms dictatorship, totalitarian dictatorship, and fascism.
Yeah, a
so
lot
it's
of
like
lefties, like anarchists, will call people who support like for example, like Cuba, Yugoslavia, even Stalin, like USSR. They'll call people who support those fascists as well, like because they support like some sort of authoritarian government. They'll be called fascists as well by like anarchists, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, so it seems like, yeah, I mean, like a lot of like lefties can be called fascists. Like if I told an anarchist I support Mao or Stalin, they would call me a fascist probably. Like,
yeah, that's what I'm saying, right? So it's like, and I remember like, but yeah, so it's just like, I would rather leave the term fascist to like people who I openly identify as fascist, and then we can use other terms to talk about other people, such as authoritarian or capitalist exploitation or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, like when
Because
when I generally think of people in power, I just think of bourgeois. I mean, that's the only thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, right. And even then that's a class thing, so we're being very specific. But it's like the word fascist, like the word socialist, it can just become to mean like when you say that to me sometimes like I mean just again, in normal discussion, like I mean, we're comrades, so we know what we're talking about. But just to an average person, calling Barack Obama a socialist is as dumb as calling George W. Bush a fascist. So it's like basically you're just insulting the person who you don't like, and that's not how to talk about things. And again, I don't mean to pick on you, comrade. I really admire your intelligence and your knowledge and understanding of the issues. I was not that smart when I was 18.
Yeah, a lot of conservatives will think George Bush isn't fascist enough for them. So
Right, but that's what I'm saying though. It's like Barack Obama's not a socialist, even though like he gave us healthcare.
Not even close.
But the same way, George W. Bush is not a fascist the way a normal person would be speaking. Like, I understand you and I might make an argument for that, maybe because capitalism is a system of exploitation that depends upon coercive measures. But I'm just saying
that they may not overly express. Like, I don't think anybody's gonna say, "Oh yeah, I'm a fascist," but like you can say that their most fundamental beliefs and ideas and what they support fundamentally are fascist like ideals. So
okay, but then you'll have the right wingers say, well, Obama might not say he's a socialist, but fundamentally the policies he's advocating are socialist. So it's like, let's just not call people whatever label that we think is just the opposite of our ideology, because we should be very precise about our terms. And like I said, we can make that argument, but I wouldn't casually say George W. Bush is a fascist. Not casually. You and I can have a conversation and understand what that means. Basically, he presides over a system of exploitation that depends upon the absolute control of capitalism.
Like that's I'm safe to say Trump's a fascist.
But yeah, I mean, but that's what I'm saying. The right winger will say Obama's a socialist, and you and I would have problems with that. So this is where we're stuck. If we're just going to use,
I think saying
Trump's a fascist, that's what I'm saying.
Actually correct. I think
no, but that's but. I'm not going to be the one to say this, but I think the average New York Times reader will say that's a stupid thing to say.
That Trump's a fascist?
Not me, but the average centrist person. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, the average centrist person's an idiot as well. I mean, like,
okay, but what I'm just saying though is that we should just not use the term socialist fascist
to insult people. Means that like you're conservative, but like you just don't want to say you're conservative.
I hear you, but we're talking about the main group of people, okay? Like most people are not in love with capitalism, and most people are not in love with socialism, and so they're just like the main people who speak English. So, but the reason I'm trying to go here is just that like I'm not for using fascist just as an insult for all your political opponents.
No,
just the same way I don't like how
that's true.
You are though. I just think you're just throwing out the word.
When I say Trump's a fascist, I legit think he's a fascist. I don't actually think all politics are fascist.
No, but
like,
wouldn't you
think
the whole system is fascist? Right?
Capitalism at its most fundamental level, yeah, fascist.
So 100%. Is Biden a fascist?
You can make the argument, yeah, he's a fascist.
Right. I mean, so that's what I'm saying. Is like we're just like we need to like actually use that term in a way that's going to be in a special category of history, and instead of just saying, well, this person's on the opposite side of my spectrum, and that's what I'm saying. It's like the same argument you can make for Biden and Trump and Bush to be fascist is going to be the argument you'll make for Obama to be a socialist. It's the same thing, and they're both equally not understandable by an average person. And I'm trying to reach the average person.
Yeah, but I also think it's important for the average person to know this as well. Like
yeah, but here's the thing though. This one, my friend from college said, it's just an epithet. You're just like, I mean, and this is the thing, like Islamofascism, people use that term, right? It's like, because there is a group of Islamic totalitarianism, but you mean totalitarianism. Why are you calling it fascism? Because there's a group of crazies who want to rule the world with Sharia law. So that's the thing. It's like, we should use the term fascist sparingly. And in public, I wouldn't call Trump, Obama, and American presidents, Biden, all of them, fascist, because actually we're talking about Hitler and Mussolini when we say fascist, and so therefore I would call capitalists the height of exploitation, but like I wouldn't use the term fascist casually, just because other people will just think you're just using it as an epithet, and then those same people are going to call Obama a socialist, and then we're just going to get stuck calling each other names.
If I'm trying to understand you, your argument is that you don't disagree with some people being fascist, but you just don't agree with it being used because you think people will think that you're just using it as a tool to scare
Okay.
people.
Yeah, I guess, but also, okay, let's talk about George W. Bush. Okay, forget about Trump. It's like, okay, fascism involves shutting down other political parties. Fascism involves one
Trump's
party
for that.
rule.
Trump's for that.
He didn't do it though.
He wants to shut down a lot of political discourse.
He didn't do it
People who
though.
disagree with him. Yeah, but
I mean,
wants to do
okay.
it, though.
Here's what right
You can
wingers
say
say.
that
Well, why do you
it
shut
feels
down
fascist,
Discord?
though.
Why do you shut down Parler? And why do you shut down our things? You know, so it's like they feel like that they're being censored. You know, so what I'm just saying is that I'm not for that term. Like I said, and here's the thing. So again, this is why I'm talking about George W. Bush, because you did say George W. Bush is a fascist. So the thing is, and like, okay, what I'm saying is though, I'm worried that other people will see that you're just using it as an epithet, and those are the same people that are going to call Obama a socialist, and the same reason you're wrong in using the term fascist is the same reason why they're wrong in calling Obama a socialist. For example,
my argument is that I don't actually care whether they disagree with him or not. Whether something is factually correct doesn't matter. If it's
okay, so
correct,
fascism involves one party rule and shutting down all other political parties. Did George W. Bush do that?
No, but you can say that he's a soft fascist.
Okay, so Obama's a soft socialist. Prove me wrong.
No, not at all.
Why?
You could say that he's just a liberal at best.
No, he's a soft socialist because socialism involves redistribution of wealth, and when you take money from rich people and give it to poor people so they buy healthcare, which is not a human right, then you're a socialist.
I would disagree with that. Actually, I actually don't think that's a good analogy.
It is.
Hold on. I think fundamentally,
I would disagree with it too. But what I'm trying to tell you is that the argument is the same. And so, for example, our viewer is writing the term fascism is watered down to be meaningless, probably on purpose. So that's what I'm worried about. If it's watered down, it won't mean anything. The same way socialist has been watered down, because like George Orwell's a socialist, UK is socialist, Europe is socialist, and you know,
I mean, like Prager says Nazi Germany was socialist. So I mean.
Right. So that's the thing, that we can't water down words so that they mean nothing. So I'm going to use fascism to refer to totalitarian dictatorships, not democratic capitalist.
Well, I mean, like we're just using it to communicate. When I think of fascism, like
right, but we have an audience. We have an audience, so I'm trying to communicate to the audience too.
Yeah, exactly. But like, well, I think the audience can. I mean, I'm coming at it from a perspective like when I heard people say fascism, like I can understand what you're trying to get at, like.
Yeah,
I mean, like,
my other thing is though is like when I asked you to define fascism, you said it's the height of capitalism. When I asked you to define capitalism, you said it was fascism. So it's like you can't have a circular definition.
Because I think they're fundamentally the same thing.
Okay, well, then the welfare state is communism, according to radical right wingers. And again, we should make distinctions between the ideologies. Because basically us putting the center right and the fascist right in the same category is the same as somebody putting a liberal and a leftist in the same category. Fundamental mistake of categories. It is. Yes. You know.
It is a mistake. I mean, like
it is.
I talk to people like conservatives. Actually, I tell them that I'm a Marxist, and they say, "Oh, so you're a liberal?" I'm like, "Okay." I mean, like, this is how I know I'm talking to
I know. I remember when I was a conservative, I didn't know the difference either. And my Stalinist friend was like, I am not a liberal. I am a leftist. And I myself have to make that distinction every single time. Don't call me liberal. I'm a leftist, which is ironic because I was against her at the time. So that's what I'm saying, though. Not the center right and the far right should also be considered two different animals. The same way the center left and the far left and the middle and the liberal left, the liberal, which is not even left, the liberal wing. So liberals and conservatives and communists and fascists are they're four different categories. They're not mutually
communism is anti-fascist in nature. So
okay, right. But what I'm saying is though, a liberal and a communist have just as much difference as a conservative and a fascist do.
Yes, I know that.
Okay, well, no, you don't know the second half of that because you were saying conservatives are fascists.
Because a lot of them are. I mean, like, yeah.
Okay, but they're going to say, well, a lot of liberals are socialists or communists, and they're not.
Well, they're just wrong. I mean, that's just something that's wrong.
Okay, but that's the thing. You can see there's a
I don't
political
care that they
spectrum,
can use
and
my logic and
right,
they
but
can
you're
use my
smearing their
logic,
half of the
but they're
spectrum, and we don't like our half of the spectrum smeared. Is what I'm trying to say.
okay. But when I'm smearing their half of the spectrum, I'm right. When they're smearing my half of the spectrum, they're wrong. That's the fundamental difference. That's why I don't care if I call them a fascist.
I don't
If
think
it's correct, then it's correct.
no, I think they might be right in that because like
Why? If I call Donald
okay.
Trump a fascist, and they're gonna say, "Oh well, Barack was a socialist," no, I'm right. Trump is a fascist. Barack Obama,
No,
he's not.
I remember when I was a Republican and these liberals were calling me a fascist and I was like, well, you're a communist. He's like, I'm not a communist. So it's like that's it. We're just calling each other names at this point, and that's why I don't think the word is helpful on a public broadcast.
Trump's a fascist though. Like I don't think that's.
You're just calling him a name at this point.
No, because he is a fascist. Like that's something that's not like it's just like
Does he advocate one party rule?
Yeah, 100% he does. He doesn't actually like political discourse. If he had the chance to shut down every single leftist or news.
Okay, does George W. Bush advocate one party rule?
I'll give you that. George W. Bush not a fascist. I'll give whatever. I don't care. But Trump fascist. If he had the chance to shut down any political discourse,
I mean, if that's all I can get from you, I'll be happy.
Notice this. Anytime he's
your audio is kind of in the underwater.
Calls them fake news. He calls for people to boycott them. Doesn't want them to listen to them. He says, "I want their ratings shut down." Basically,
I know. He unleashed the mob on Congress. I hear you.
He's a narcissist. Of course.
Okay, but that's why just out of like public thing. But you know what? I'm glad that people got to see our dissension here because look, our movement has contradictions. We have to resolve certain contradictions. We have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of thinking to do, and we're not saying we have all the answers. And this is also me and my comrade here. We're not pre-planning or we don't have we're not unanimous, and we have dissensions, and so but our goal is 95% of the same, which is that we want a better world and equality and for all human beings, and our theism drives us and our belief in God and our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So I hope everybody really enjoyed that discussion because this is an honest thing and we're just trying to learn and we're trying to explain ourselves as best as we can. Go ahead.
By the way, the last part was just literally us discussing linguistics fundamentally.
Yeah. I mean, but it's important though, right? Because words describe truth. So
yeah, because like some people don't understand like some definitions, like because like I come from a different culture, a different country. I may understand something.
True.
Like I probably understand something differently than a lot of people do.
No, and you know what? Fascism did involve what it was that the capitalism serves the state, basically, right? And so like we said, the radicalization of the middle class, because the promise was that like we'll make the middle class rich. And like, that's why we're invading Romania and all these other countries because they had oil fields and stuff. Like basically the nation is the idol of the country. And so, somebody once said, when fascism comes to America, it'll be the flag draped in the cross, and so nationalism, like in one sense, fascism is hyper nationalism. Yeah, and Republicans are a bunch of jingoistic nationalistic propagandists.
Oh, I hate identity politics while they engage in identity
politics. Yeah. My
it's
America,
so hilarious.
My Southern heritage. Yeah, all right. So my whiteness. So
like okay.
Yep. I'm persecuted because I'm white, and so it's actually it's good. It's really good that I said the last thing because you're right in the sense that fascism puts everything to the service of the nation, and conservative republicanism is definitely about worshiping the nation as like an idol unto itself. My country right or wrong, and that's a very unchristian idea, and definitely there's a streak of fascism in that. But that's the thing, I'm just not gonna use the label of fascist because I want to be really precise with my terms.
I also to me, really anti-fascist because like my great grandfather got shot by a Nazi.
That's true. It's a different culture.
Fighting for the communists, so like
you
fought
come
for
from
communism. So
I'm American.
My family.
You have a history.
Nazis.
Yeah, you have a family history. Yeah, but the last thing I kind of want to say was that I kind of missed that point, but go ahead. You're kind of far from your mic.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that communism is the best system. It's the only way to achieve a good equality, not just a good world. I mean, like it's just the truth. I feel like I mean, like when people realize what communism is, what it can do, how good it is, they won't turn back. I mean, that's how I was. I mean, like once I saw what communism is, how good it is, I never want to turn back. Like I'll probably die communist at this point.
Yeah, I remember during the build up to the
I love
Iraq
it.
War, like even though the people were like, should we really go to war? They were like called traitors. And then like they renamed French fries to freedom fries because they were mad that the French and the Germans didn't want us going to Iraq. And like
They were
looking
originally
back,
made in Belgium.
yeah, but it's the same thing in World War One. They renamed German measles to just measles because we were at war with Germany. So the element and like it was about support our troops. Like you want to go to war for oil and imperial reasons, and you're like talking about the troops. Like it's against the troops to send them into a war where they have no business being. So it's like all this fascism also involves a lot of propaganda. So yeah, the government propaganda that was coming out was definitely fascist at that
Well,
point.
like a lot
But
of
that's the thing.
conservatives don't care
So
about lying.
I would rather, that's the thing. I'd rather discuss here. So, this is what I was gonna say. To me, the slur of the insult of bourgeois capitalist is way worse than fascist. But like you said, you're from a different culture and you have a family tragedy to do. So to me, if you're a bourgeois capitalist, I mean, like, because see, in a way, if in theory, if you could have a fascist dictator who would like redistribute the wealth and then just like rewrite like Bismarck, he united Germany, and what he did was he did a lot of the reforms the socialists wanted and the Christian Democrats wanted. He like established a welfare state, and then he removed the Catholic bishops from like the government parliament or diet or whatever, and then he dissolved the Socialist Party and he dissolved the Christian Party. So he was a fascist, but like he instituted socialist reforms and Christian reforms in a way, like secular reforms. Huh?
Who is this again?
Otto von Bismarck. He's the uniter of Germany in the 1880s.
Oh, okay.
So in a way, he had a lot of fascist tendencies. So in a way, to me, you could have fascism in a way that it works and it doesn't hurt people. But of course, anytime you have like one man who has all the power, and then you have like the secret police, and you have like one party control and the press being shut down, it's probably not going to end up good. I don't think it's a good idea to go that way. So I'd rather critique someone's ideology, and also if I need to, I'll call them a bourgeois capitalist, which to me is like the worst insult because you're basically a selfish criminal. Rather than just use our viewer was saying, like the term has been watered down, and that's why I'm avoiding the term.
I see. Yeah, I just use the word like bourgeois, fascist, capitalist. Like again, yeah. I mean, like I view it differently.
Yeah, no, I just use a class critique, which is bourgeois capitalist, because that's class and ideology rather than political spectrum. I just feel it's more accurate. But like I said, I gave you the reasons why you were right. So and this is why Marxism is beautiful. It's called was influenced by Hegel and the Hegelian dialectic, right? Instead of like I'm right, you're wrong. Like I'm gonna end the show now because like I hate the fact that you keep calling whatever George. I voted for George W. Bush, by the way. So I hate the fact that you called George W. Bush a fascist. So I'm just gonna hang up the call. It's like, well, let me talk to you a little more. I'll see where you're right. You can talk to me a little more. You can see where I'm right. And like we both have a better understanding of the issue. And this is the genius of Marxist dialectics and dialectical materialism, folks, is that we resolve the contradictions. We try to understand each other. We actually have the key to use dialectical materialism to resolve contradictions. And, this is what socialism is at its best. It's like, it's not about an ego. It's not about a single person coming to power. It's really about us having discussions and implementing the policies based on those discussions to create a more perfect society, a better union, and just equality and justice for all, and egalitarianism. See, in America, we love the word equality, and we translate the French Revolution, liberty, equality and fraternity as like equality, but equality is a different word. See, if we're equal, that means like you and I, you know, we both have the right to like work for minimum wage, right? But if we're egalitarian, we are, there's no fundamental inequality between us, that we both have good housing, good food, good jobs, good education. So, and you know, the motto of the Black Panthers was jobs, education, and housing. And so like 50 years later, we still don't have good jobs, education, and housing for all the people of this country. So we should have listened a lot more to the radicals of the 60s who were holding it down before Comrade and I were born.
Exactly. I agree. I think that's probably a good way to end it.
I agree. Thank you so much for having the discussion, Comrade. And I look forward to next time.
No problem.
Thank you for watching. Have a great day. God bless.